Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's been a minute. I realize I haven't made one of these shows in a while. I've been busy working on some stuff, which I will tell you about in just a moment. But welcome. Glad you're here for this edition of Dissident Dispatch. It's a very important episode. Please do me a favor and like and share this broadcast, especially with parents who are thinking school choice sounds like a great idea and they're very supportive of it. Share it with people who very much support Donald Trump's supposed policy for closing the Department of Education, because it's very important that you understand what that means, what closing or dismantling or these different words that you've heard, what it actually would look like in practice. And it's a little more complicated than you think. And my guest tonight, Jake Klyczek, is going to discuss it with us. He's written a brilliant article. He's done a ton of research, breaking it all down, and we're going to go through it with you. It's a bit dense, but I can't think of anything more important. If you think in terms of Marvel, scenarios, the education system in this country is the Mind Stone. And we really don't want to hand that over just yet completely to Thanos, right? So before I welcome Jake to the program, please join me also in celebrating a big thing that I have done. I've, with a group of other people, have launched a learning center, and it is called Cogito Learning Center. And we have a website, cogitolearningcenter.com. We are currently open and taking, signups for a free consultation, 30-minute consultation. The purpose of this learning center is to meet the needs of you parents who are not leaving the system anytime soon, or maybe even have your kids in private school for all we know, but you still are dissatisfied. You feel like your child could do more. They're not getting the enrichment they need, they want, they deserve, or you want for them. They're not reading full books. They're not really learning to write. Maybe they're reading a lot of nonfiction, but they haven't read a novel in a while. Or you want them to study logic. I'll be teaching logic. Middle school and high school students will have opportunity for that. And my very own course called Words Matter, where we will dissect some of the words that they hear all the time, like democracy and equity and, empathy and things like that. We'll look at the etymology of the words. We'll look at how they're used and misused very often. Not with any political agenda, but I want kids to learn to think. So cogito means I think. If you want your children to think and therefore be able to read better and write better and so forth, then this might be the solution for you. We also put together custom programs for people who want, a small group of kids from the same school to get the same enrichment. We can work with you on that. And we have private tutoring, college essay coaching, and of course, homeschool teaching as well for these subjects. So check us out. From now through the 2nd of March, we are offering $25 off our enrichment courses. So I hope you will take a look. Thanks for considering it. It is sort of like my baby, but I'm working on it with a few other teachers as well. So thanks for checking it out. All right. So without further ado, please welcome to the show my guest, Taoist professor, also known as Jake Klyczek. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Deb. It's been a while.
It has been a while, but you've been busy.
Yeah, I've been busy. Yeah.
So for those of you in the audience who haven't read it yet, I have linked in the description to the latest amazing piece of research that Jake has put together. Did you mean it to be pronounced Trumped or Trump-ed? I'm not really sure because it could go either way.
Either way, it worked out nice because the actual acronym for the Department of Education, it's not DOE, that's Department of Energy, it's USED. Right. So ED kind of, was Trump Ed, double entendre.
Exactly. I feel really bad. I didn't do a full introduction of who you are. So people were out there going, who is this guy? I'm going to let you introduce yourself. But the thing I want people to know is we did a show together probably last year, and we were talking about, School World Order, which is, the book that you wrote, but also just conceptually, we talked about, what's really going on. But I think maybe people were not quite ready for it, right? I think that in the sense that, my audience is concerned, they were still very much mired in, we got to get the porn out of the libraries, like sort of discrete little goals, like this is bad and woke is bad and DEI is bad. And people were out, playing whack-a-mole on the bad things in school and the curriculum and this and that. Whereas you, for ages, really decades, you've been up here looking at the big picture, the huge, like Lynn Taylor and some of the other folks, you've been looking at this education industrial complex, how this all works, all the little tentacles and so forth. So I think when you came on, people maybe were still down in the weeds and not really, kind of processing it. So I hope everyone watching will go back and watch that show, because it's also very important context for what we're talking about tonight, as is Jake's book. But we want to talk tonight about the policy now. Trump's been elected. A lot of people thought, especially those down in the weeds, our savior has arrived. It's all going to be fixed now. And so, especially for those who didn't watch that show and weren't prepared to understand that Superman isn't coming and that's not how this works, you're going to take it apart for us, right?
Yeah. So, my book, it's sort of, there's two angles to the book. So, corporatization and technocracy. So, and they both dovetail together, but I sort of walk it through sort of incrementally how all those building blocks get built sort of chronologically. And it starts with school corporatization. And so that's the broader school choice movement. The first several chapters are just laying out what is the umbrella term school choice. What does it mean? So it's a basket term that means everything from charter schools to a basket of different ways to funnel public tax dollars into various forms of private education, whether it's a parochial school, like a Groton type private school that's not parochial, could be also homeschool, and could also be ed tech corporations, right? So you could purchase products and services, applications, using a list of things that go from vouchers to education savings accounts to tax credits, etc. So the charter school movement's pretty much been sort of locked in. It's pretty much ubiquitous. So right now, when they're talking about school choice, largely what they're referring to is the vouchers, the ESAs, and the tax credits.
Can I? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it occurs to me as I'm listening to you talk. You and I know this stuff so well. You know it way better than I do, and I know it better than like the average person walking the street. Can we back up for a moment and define a couple of key things for the audience? Like knowing who my audience are, I think this might help them. There are a couple of premises I want to throw out there that I want people to be mindful of, like that they're walking around accepting is okay or a given that they haven't really questioned. And then there are a couple of terms that I think people think they know what they mean and they maybe don't know what they mean. Okay, so first of all, a lot of people are walking around believing that the Department of Education defines curriculum. That is not correct. Another thing that people are, so I'm just, please trust me and take my word for it. That's not how it works. Okay. You can go research it later, but let's get that out of the way. The second thing is that a lot of people assume, because it's been the status quo for so long, that it is right and proper for the government, whether it's the federal government or the state, to run education or to decide what students should learn. That somehow compelling this as a thing that parents have to do, compelling your attendance, compelling taxpayers to pay for it, that all of that, which is the status quo, has always been and always should be. And we got to start there. And any solution that we have to making education better in America must by definition start there. Like the idea that that might be the problem doesn't even enter most people's minds. So everything we're going to talk about tonight accepts that premise. The government, the people for school choice, the voucher people, the charter people, everybody's starting hoping you accept that, hoping you think there is no way out of that. That's like, like I can't not breathe oxygen. Like they think that's where you're starting. So just remember that you're already in that, system in your head, in part probably because you went through schools and they told you that. But just that's a premise that you're accepting. It's not necessarily truth. Okay. And then finally, when we're talking about things like corporatization and so on and so forth, or privatization and so on, we're not necessarily making a value judgment that corporations are bad or privatization is bad. What we're saying is that when you've accepted as the premise that the government can or should use your tax dollars to pay for something called education, you then have to decide, and they're just plowing ahead like you did, like you accepted this, it was okay, that it's also okay to give your tax dollars to private corporations. So that's what we're talking about. Not that, some private corporation might want to open a school somewhere of its own accord with its own money. That's not what we're talking about. And nor are we talking about, so we're not saying that's bad. We're not anti-private school. We just define private, at least chime in if you disagree with me, Jake, as private. That means the people paying for it are investing their own money, and they're being upfront of what the product they're selling, what they're taking from your kids, how they're going to use it. It's a contract between you and some private entity. You're under no obligation through any other means to pay for it, whether you're using it or not. Corporatization of public school means that now there's an avenue for your tax dollars to go to private corporations. Understand something, only through charters right now is that possible. And it's only through a charter system. What you're about to talk about is that's going to open up to way more. So I just want to get that out of the way, because I think a lot of people might hear some of these terms and go, are they like anti-private entities? Are they anti-free market? Well, I don't understand, Dab. I thought you were very pro-free market. No, we're talking about this creepy thing called public-private partnership, which we used to just call fascism, back in the olden golden days. But now we have nice euphemisms for it. So anyway, I will shut up now and let you continue.
Yeah, no. Those are all, I'm glad you laid all that out. Those are things that, need to be ironed out before we get started. It's funny, the whole public-private partnership model, that's the stakeholder capitalism model, right? So, and you mentioned sort of that it's also basically synonymous with fascism. Charlotte Iserbyt, my mentor, she wrote forward to my book. For people who don't know, quick breakdown is she worked in the Department of Education under Ronald Reagan, blew the whistle on a technology program called Project BEST, Basic Education Skills Through Technology. And once upon a time, she was at a meeting where they were talking about public-private partnerships, and she goes, "Isn't it kind of like corporate fascism?" And she said, they all, "Well, gee, Charlotte, we never thought of it like that before." So, this is an old hat that's been coming down the pipe for a while. As you know, the first foot in the door was the public-private charter school. So it's a private company that can take public tax dollars. Okay, now what they want to do is put in the ESAs, the tax credits, and the vouchers. And what that's going to do, there's two angles to that. One is that, first of all, it's going to take your private school and your home school and your religious school, the things that make those private per se, and in other words, outside of the public or government sphere. Once you start funneling the government money into it, you are going to bring the federal regulations and the federal control. So what you're actually doing is it's corporatization, but it's also an expansion of big government. It's also turning private institutions into government institutions. And some of the ESAs in particular. So if in the article that I wrote, I was basing what the moves that the Trump administration is going to make based off of Project 2025. I know everybody says that that's a liberal talking point, and that I like to say, well, that's sort of a right-wing deflection, but the document exists. Many people that were in his first administration were involved in authoring it. Several of them are in the
minimum of 4 are now in the current administration.
Right. And if you look, and I'm doing all this so that when I quote from the document as far as what they want to do with ESA is, you can, for the people that might quickly sort of shoo away anything associated between Trump and Project 2025, because he said, by the way, that, you know, he doesn't have anything to do with it and isn't interested in it. But if you looked at the hearing, the Linda McMahon hearing, basically everything she said was right in line with Project 2025. So when they dismantle the Department of Education, they're going to move basically all the offices to other departments. Two of the departments that where they want to move the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act and basically Title IX enforcement, those are going to go to HHS and the DOJ respectively. That's laid out in Project 2025. McMahon has suggested in the interview that that's where they'll go. They talked about using ESAs from Title I funds. That's laid out in Project 2025. And some of the things that they would use the ESAs for include, quote, curricular materials, quote, education therapies, quote, personal tutors. But all of these could just be textbooks, or it could be a counselor, or maybe a human tutor, but it could also be ed tech products, right? So this is another way that the corporatization angle comes in.
Cool.
Right?
And people need to understand the incentives. A private corporation doesn't decide, hey guys, let's go try to sell the government on, you know, giving us the tax dollars, or allowing parents to use these things to buy our stuff, or give us a tax credit for giving scholarships to students to go buy our stuff. Okay. Why would they do that? I'm wondering why. What would be in it for them? Okay. Now people might say, well, profit. Sure. They want to get the money. Now think about that. Do you want a company profiting off of a captured pile of money? The government could decide tomorrow, tax you more, you know, appropriate more. So are they really working for the money, or are they just convincing the politicians to allow you to have some more of it and take more from you to give to them? Second thing is, as you point out so well in the article, you're the first person I've seen who did a great job of explaining how it benefits both sides. In other words, it grows the government and gives the government more sway with what's going on in schools, how success is defined, and so on. But it also gives these corporations a say in what your children are going to learn. And the two are going to go back and forth against each other. And who has the big, deep pockets to fund campaigns? These giant corporations. What money are they going to be using that they profited from? Your tax dollars. So you see how it's a self-licking ice cream cone? Now, what concerned me, and you said this in your article, you talked about these scholarship, the success pay for success program. This is so important. Parents, who should define success for your child's education? What is your big complaint right now? That the schools run by the government are defining success in a way that you don't agree with, between grade inflation, mental health supports, SEL, all this other garbage. They're defining success as, I have a very sweet child who loves everyone but doesn't know how to tell time. Okay. So if the corporations get in and, you know, are they going to define success the way you want, or the way your child would want for their future? Or are they going to define it in some other new way, or some combination of ways? And if it is exposed to the political winds, why are you so sure? Just because Donald Trump is president today and a bunch of conservatives, so-called, might be running things today, why are you so certain, especially with the teacher population that doesn't agree with you, that this is going to stay success metrics that you agree with? And what if we told you, and now Jake is going to tell you, that all of this is designed to fit into the fourth industrial revolution, that these success metrics are not going to have anything to do with what you think they're going to have to do with? Now I'm turning it back to you.
Yeah. So, you know, the stipulations for the ESAs, if you look at any of the state legislation, you know, if somebody can find a state and let me know where they issue ESAs with zero oversight, you let me know, but I couldn't find any. And some of the examples that I used, one of them was the Alabama Choose Act. And in there, it suggests that by taking the ESA money, you must comply with state regulations, including health regulations. So think, right, wherever you fell on the jab scenario, that, you know, that could be a requirement for you to keep your ESAs. Now, the ECC
right here.
Educating Children for Choice Act. That's the other school choice reform that they want to press. Now, this one's a little different because this one, it specifically says that the government can't regulate anybody that receives the scholarship. It also can't regulate the scholarship granting organization in terms of how they want to issue the scholarship. So what that opens the door for is that what they call impact investing. And there's several of them. I put a few case studies in there. Sagamore Institute and the Point Foundation are a couple of these scholarship granting organizations.
This one right here.
They focus on impact investments. What that means is it's an impact investment is pay for success is a type of impact investment that is stipulated. There's provisions for it in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Other types of impact investments are like social impact bonds. Typically, they have been geared towards ESG, social credit type outcomes, environmental, social government outcomes. So the S part of that would be basically DEI stuff. The Point Foundation, as an example, it focuses on improving educational outcomes for LGBTQ BIPOC populations. But, pay for success and other types of impact investments, they don't necessarily have to be for like woke sociocultural outcomes. They could also be for a range of socioeconomic outcomes minus that cultural woke veneer. And so, if you think that, well, Trump's going to get rid of all the DEI stuff, first of all, I want to let you know that the executive orders he signed, most of them just repeal other executive orders, DEI executive orders, most of which don't pertain to the Department of Education. And then those that do, they don't repeal DEI provisions that are in legislation, including the ESSA. So there's nothing blocking pay for success contracts based on DEI provisions in the ESSA. But even if it was, you should know that several individuals and think tanks affiliated with Project 2025 have also flirted with impact investment. One of them is Max Eden, at the American Enterprise Institute. He wrote a piece on school choice and impact investment, focuses largely on socioeconomic outcomes. So basically career pathways, workforce training types of pay for success outcomes. So I should let you know that how does that financial mechanism work? Basically what it is so the scholarship granting organization is going to get a donation from an individual or a corporation. That corporation is going to get the tax credit. Then the SGO company can enter into a pay for success contract. And the pay for success contract, they're going to take that scholarship donation. They're going to put that money up front. And based on whether or not they meet the intended outcomes, they will get a portion of that money back, or they get all of it back. Or if they exceed the outcomes, they could maybe make a profit. In the instance of a nonprofit corporation, they just have to funnel it back into more scholarships. But several other of organizations. So Ed Choice, it used to be the Milton Friedman and his wife's name is in there. Foundation for Educational Choice.
Yeah, that one's down
Heritage
here.
Foundation as well. And the Charles Koch Foundation. The reason I mention those three is because, they're all four of them: the American Enterprise Institute, Ed Choice, Heritage Foundation, Charles Koch Foundation. These are all affiliated with or partners of the State Policy Network, which is a consortium of basically neoconservative, beltway libertarian type think tanks. And Lindsay M. Burke, who is the main author of Project 2025, is a fellow at Ed Choice. She's also, I think, a fellow or a director at Heritage Foundation. Jonathan Butcher is also, I think he's a Will Skillman fellow or something like that at Heritage as well. So what I'm saying is that all of the old school think tanks behind all things Republican that were behind Project 2025, they are all involved in pushing for this impact investing, pay for success stuff.
Right. Well, okay. So now that I want to come back to the article in a moment, because I want to also talk about how the reorg would actually play out, what's going to go where. But I want to address something, because this comes up every time I bring up school choice. By the way, folks listening, The term school choice itself is one of those coded, loaded terms like Black Lives Matter that was literally designed so that people like me, people like Jake, would sound like evil, horrible, mean-spirited, greedy, nasty, far leftist, teachers union supporting, anti-free market, blah, blah, pro-government people if we criticized it. Just like if you said, I don't support Black Lives Matter. Oh my God, you horrible racist. No, you have school choice right now, especially in places like Texas. They've had school choice for over a decade. How well did that work out? It was a different kind of school choice, but they had it. They had all kinds of charters, they had all kinds of things, and they're still having problems. So I want to bring up one of these comments. This is Laura says, people are using it for their children to learn to read. That wasn't happening in public school. First of all, not completely accurate. I'm not pro public school. I'm an abolitionist, but go look at what's going on right now in the Deep South, in Mississippi. Okay. They have had these teachers there to a certain degree went rogue way before Sold a Story started teaching phonics. Their kids are exceeding all expectations in reading, and that's a public school. There are other school districts around the country where they've also done the same thing. They've said, we're not doing this crazy whole word crap anymore. We're going to teach phonics, and the kids are learning to read. The fact that most schools have a problem with learning to read is real. I've talked about it ad nauseum on this program, but the premise that you taking taxpayer subsidy and going to a private school and your kid will magically now learn to read is false. There are at least, I think, 10 or 15 districts in Texas alone where they don't have any private schools. There's nowhere for them to go. So what are they going to do? So who's going to come in and fill that void? Well, AI, computers, stuff like that. These tech bros are going to fill the void. And you assuming that because it's a private corporation, they're going to teach your kid to read properly. Who do you think was behind the programs and pouring money into the programs for whole word reading and all this other garbage? There were private companies behind that too. Just because the government spent the taxpayer dollars directly on that garbage doesn't change that fact. So this notion that private equals better automatically isn't true. The idea that the incentive of the people pushing the stuff is to make sure your kids are all wonderful, independent thinkers and great readers, whatever, also isn't true. You don't come up with a chart like about workforce training and success metrics for socioeconomic stat. Where did I see read well? Where did I see think for yourself? Where did I see math skills in there? No, this is going to be measured against metrics that serve the people who created the systems. So the fact that people in the short term are going to take some money and go somewhere or hire a tutor and their kid's going to learn to read better is not a selling point for growing government. It is not a selling point for letting technocrats start data raping your children more than they already are. So they're dangling that carrot in front of you. You're desperate. You want something better. And they know that you can't leave, so to speak. So they're just going to capture you differently. But they got to sell it to you first. And this is how they sell it to you. So I'm sorry to pick on you, Laura, but this is what you've been sold. You've been sold a news story. And the news story is that these people care about you. What's in it for them then? Who benefits? The money's not going to you. The money's going attached to your kid. That's how they justify it. But it's not going to you. You will not be the one choosing the curriculum. You will not be the one in charge of what success means.
Yeah, and you're also, to your point, okay, I don't know how much they intend to dole out as far as if they take the Title I funds and convert a portion of those to ESAs. Title I funds are designated for students and schools really. I mean, it'll be students if they get the ESA part, but schools that are located in impoverished communities. So I think the portion of the Title I funds are based on just how far below the poverty line does the school fall. But I based on the state laws that I've looked at, the amount that those ESA programs, handout, it's not enough to put a dent in elite private school, even if it's nearby, right? Like a Groton or a Dalton or a Hotchkiss or something like that. Like, so even if you have a private or parochial school around, it's not going to be the top tier. But in most instances, in most of those neighborhoods that are impoverished as such, the likelihood that there are other schools, whether they be charter, is very slim. And if there is one, the closest one is going to be not so close. And these types of communities also have problems with public transportation, right? So, you know, what are you going to do with that money then, right? It's either going to go to an online charter school, it's going to go to another public school, or it's going to go to an array of ed tech products that could maybe, you know, ostensibly supplement the not so great education that the student's getting at the public school. So to your point about what are the companies getting out of it? Well, you know, the cliche is data is the new oil.
That's right.
The way that, right, the Pay for Success scholarships and the ESAs basically subsidizing ed tech products that are going to data mine your students' cognitive behavioral psychometrics in order to pigeonhole them into a career pathways curriculum, basically predetermined, and then they can earn basically tokenized credits towards that matriculation, moving into whatever job they have lined up for you in the Pay for Success program, which is all basically turning you into a human resource, right? Human capital management, making sure that you are going to fulfill the quotas for the new digital economy in the 4IR.
Well, and the other thing is that the people who have the deepest pockets, and they'll only get deeper with all this tax money that has been conscripted away from people and coming back into their pockets, the people who can open up sort of warehouse-like facilities, right? And even possibly run their own private bus to get to it, where they can just host your kid while they sit in front of a screen. Okay. Those are going to be these corporations. So, you know, the little micro school is as cute as that is, right? And I love them. I support micro schools. But even if they all started taking this money and the government approved of every single one, was like rubber stamp, you can all, you know, open your little 10-person micro school. Here's some money. Let's say they did that. They couldn't possibly outpace these kind of corporations and, you know, giant foundations and other people are going to come in and pop up a big building in which there are, you know, hundreds of spaces, and they'll take all comers because they have adaptive AI now. So the little micro school can't necessarily address all the special needs. Maybe one is for special needs, maybe one isn't, whatever. They can't do it all the people. But somebody goes, I have adaptive AI. I can take 200 kids. We have monitors and it's state of the art, and they'll be so prepared for the 21st century. And there will be plenty of people who will say, that sounds great. And they'll take your tax dollars and they'll go there, and you'll have no more visibility into what those kids are learning on those adaptive systems than you have now in the public system. But you'll have the illusion that because it's private, because it's high tech, because it's brand spanking new, and maybe the building is super safe and they have metal detectors and they have, you know, guards and who knows what else, organic meals in the cafeteria, you're going to think it's fantastic, but it's still not you making the decisions or even knowing what the heck's going on. And then God forbid your kid doesn't succeed. Then what?
Well, just you know, just to sort of give your audience an idea of what types of technologies we're talking about that could be supplemented with these ESAs. I'll go ahead and lay out a few. So when they talk about curricular materials, you mentioned adaptive learning courseware, which is what they call weak or basically dumb AI. It's a very limited algorithm that's basically going to expedite your child, the student, to higher learning if they're really fast at the module. If they're not so quick and need to be remediated, the algorithm is going to go ahead and run them back through the same lesson again. And then based on those algorithms, that's what's going to determine whether or not the student goes to career pathway A, B, C, maybe higher learning, where they suggest that you could use it for education therapies. That could be everything from a host of social emotional learning biofeedback wearables that include heart monitors and brainwave monitors. So one company is called HeartMath. They data mine EKGs. They have them at the wellness center at one of the schools where I teach. They're largely used to help the students with managing test anxiety. Some brainwave monitors. One company's called, we showed it on your, if people want to go back and watch the episode that we did the first time, it's called BrainCo. It was created by a Chinese electronics, state electronics company in partnership with Harvard academics. But Betsy DeVos, who was Trump's Secretary of Education last time, who, by the way, has, even though after, you know, the J6 event, she threw him under the bus. Now she's endorsing him in his education plans again. I don't want to digress here, but she had a company called where she was invested in. I think she was on the board of directors, had to step down. The company is now defunct. I can't find it anywhere. If somebody else can, you know, please send me a link to it. But it's called NeuroCore, and it data mines the brain waves, and they're specialized in helping students with ADHD. Okay. Others could be, there's a robot called Moxie, which is a social emotional learning robot. It runs on what they call social GPT. So it's generative AI, but it's not just a large language model. It can parse emotions by scanning the child's face. And then it can mirror those emotions. And it's supposed to help students that are on the spectrum be able to identify a range of emotions, help them parse facial expressions. It's supposed to translate to real interaction with human beings. But you know, this dovetails with, quote, personal tutors, which is another expense you could use your Title I ESAs for. And they already have sort of a line of GPT AI tutors.
Right. They don't mean me. They mean this guy.
Yeah, that's Moxie. There, isn't that cute? I think it's created by Pixar or something like that. The graphics were designed. But those links in there, one of those links to OpenAI's tutor. They have a tutoring platform for OpenAI. And they also have one, it's called Conmigo. I should note that the adaptive learning course, right? There's Peter Thiel there. He's in the sort of the ecosystem of you know, behind JD Vance, and that this is sort of this is the tech oligarchy behind the Trump administration. But he's invested in a couple different products. I think it's both Clever and Newton adaptive learning course, where I mentioned DeVos is invested in the biofeedback EEG headbands. What didn't make it in there, I forgot, is that Elon Musk, he is invested in Khan Academy. Okay, so all the broligarchs are back there. I'm sort of jumping ahead, but you know, the K-12 Inc. I learned this one just recently. So K-12 Inc. was the first charter school, first online virtual charter school ever created. It was with
that was Bill Bennett's thing, right?
You got it. And you know who who was his speechwriter? His speechwriter was Peter Thiel. And
yes. And then let's not forget this creepazoid over here.
Yeah, that was where I was going.
Larry Ellison, Mr. Transhumanist.
Yeah, he's very, I mean, if you didn't intuit it just by looking at him and his interest in all of this healthcare stuff, he's heavily invested in life extension technologies. All right. I mean, he kind of looks like the caricature of a billionaire that would be interested in life extension. And this is the guy, I don't know if you've seen the clip. It's pretty much went viral. Everybody's probably seen it. That's in the loop of trying to see what the broligarchs are up to. And there's the clip. I don't know where he was speaking, but he was talking about this futuristic AI world where we'll have AI nodes watching everything everywhere all the time. And
I saw that.
Yeah, pre-crime.
And he says it like it's a good thing. Isn't it awesome?
Yeah.
They'll be watched 24/7.
Yeah. And you know, and Peter Thiel's Palantir is the same sort of ecosystem. And then you've got Musk with his Starlink and his social media to sort of pull in a bunch of the data and to transmit the data. So, I mean, you know, just with those three individuals behind him, you know, you should at least be a little skeptical, just a little skeptical.
But it's also important to note that it's not just that they're behind him. This isn't brand new. This has been building since the late 1950s. The UN has wanted this, you know, the UN, UNESCO, whatever, has wanted this since forever. All right. They talked about bringing all non-state actors, you know, in terms of schools, private schools, parochial schools, home schools. Their goals are different perhaps than, let's say, the neocon tech bros goals, but they all align. So, you know, you can like have different end goals, but basically choose the same means to get there. And then it's really just a competition. And you guys as parents have to decide, who do you think, which ideology do you think is going to win? And when they're ending up holding the ring of power of all that data that they're going to collect, all the money they're going to have access to, all of the ability to push your kids around and do whatever, which one do you think it's going to be? Fascism? Do you think it's going to be communism? Because they're still going to be battling it out, but they're both using the same means.
Well,
they're not using different means. It's not like people go, you're pro-union if you oppose this. I'm like, no, the unions will love this. They'll just use it for different ends.
Well, what's her face? Randy Weingarten. Okay. She once upon a time ran a charter school when she was the head of UFT. Okay. Yes. Really, they just would like for there to be, I don't think they have any problems with charter schools or vouchers. They just want to be able to have their union contracts part of those deals, right? That's right. The charter school idea was created by Albert Shanker, who was the president,
the union president
of teachers. Yes, right. And this was in the early 80s. Another thing, I came across this. It's kind of a side note, but it's illustrative of what you're getting at here. So as I'm looking into the Koch brothers stuff, Koch Foundation, etc., I stumble across something called the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. It's not in that article because it doesn't have anything to do with education. It was created in 2019. The article I found, the title was something like, "Can the Koch brothers and George Soros save the world from forever wars?" It's a foundation that's called a transpartisan action tank that was funded by the Soros Open Society Foundation, the Charles Koch Foundation, also the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, and Ford Foundation. It's just to show you, to your point, that right and left. And then think about Scott Bessent, right? He's the Treasury guy that used to be a Soros guy. So don't think that just because the Koch arm of the oligarchy gets to have more of a stage presence this time around, that that things can't flip back the other way, or that's not at one level, I don't want to say theater, but it's sort of, it's moot, right? To your point about, the long game, all the ed tech stuff goes, cybernetics, the Macy's cybernetics conferences, right? This is late 1940s, early 1950s, when the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was created, early 1950s. Shortly thereafter, Macy's cybernetics conferences, they were using the RAND Corporation's PPBS systems, planning, programming, and budgeting systems for centralized planning of the Department of Education, Health, and Welfare. And so you had this centralized planning arm. You had sort of the cybernetic aims moving in that direction. And you had somebody like B.F. Skinner developing his analog teaching machines that becomes the basis for the adaptive learning courseware. If you look at like Dreambox or any of these companies, they will tell you that the algorithms they use are based on B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning, his psychology.
Conditioning, guys, conditioning. You thought teaching was going to happen. No, conditioning. And, if you're trying to get away from indoctrination, if your whole thing is like, well, their current schools are indoctrinating my children, this is not an improvement on that. Okay. They're treating your child almost like a dog. Okay. Like an animal that needs to be conditioned. I want to read this, if it's all right with you. I want to read what you wrote verbatim about these the pay for success scholarships, because this section really stuck out to me. In sum, PFS scholarships fueled by ECA tax credits will facilitate public-private education partnerships in which corporations steer the funding streams for both public and private schools, while federal and state governments subsidize these companies' investments in social credit and human capital markets. Is that where you want your tax dollars going, to just help subsidizing companies' investments? At the same time, Title I ESAs will expand government control over private schools, including religious and home schools, while federally subsidizing corporate ed tech products geared to digitally track and trace PFS impacts on students' social credit outcomes. Altogether, Project 2025 school choice reforms will expand big government control of private, religious, and homeschools while expanding big business management of both public and private education through impact scholarships, while advanced ESG and other social credit outcomes streamlined by big tech corporations that helm the planned stakeholder economy of the 401R. Now, this is really important because about a week ago, Donald Trump opined, mused, as it was reported, that perhaps we could use ESG for our own purposes. Perhaps ESG wouldn't be so bad if we were running it, if we were the guys holding the ring of power. So they have no interest in throwing it into the fires of Mordor. They want to control it for themselves. And then it just becomes a game of ping pong of who's in control of this. But one last thing I want to say here before we go looking at the different reorganizations of the Department of Ed is that it is really important for those who are sitting there in their heads arguing with me and saying, no, Deb, these bills are at the state level. These bills are at the state level. And my congressman, my legislator, they've assured me there are protections in there to protect so that if I take the money and my school takes the money, that this won't affect it. They won't change anything. There's protections that they're not going to come in and regulate. First of all, this show is discussing the federal government. Okay. And as the federal government currently, even though they don't decide curriculum and they don't define it, the amount of money being poured into the market, the education market, the amount of regulation in terms of what success metrics look like for schools to actually be accredited, get any of this huge honeypot of money, whatever, are defined for the federal government. So if you thought that dismantling the Department of Ed was going to send everything back to the state and that your local legislature is going to be able to protect you from this, you're absolutely wrong, because these market players are going to affect the market. That doesn't know boundaries. That doesn't know from Texas versus Alabama versus, Mississippi, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So by giving your state government the permission to set this up and to take federal dollars setting this up, you are creating a brand new bureaucracy, a brand new lane that actually invites more, not just state control, but federal control. And now, Jake, if you wouldn't mind explaining to us, I'm going to scroll back to it, the differentiation here, this what is going to happen and what's going to go where and why.
Yeah. So he he keeps saying, who knows, he might not know that much about, the behemoth and the leviathan, the octopus that is all the federal legislation that makes up not just the entitlements, but the actual Department of Ed and the bureaucracies. But he keeps saying things like, he being Trump saying, he wants to return education to the states. Well, that doesn't happen just by dissolving or dismantling the Department of Education, because all the department does is basically administer, regulate, and enforce the entitlement funding. Right? They have they can do some research projects where they can have some discretionary grant programs where they can sort of influence, curriculum in some ways, just like, but like through the regional labs and things like that. But it's largely just to basically oversee and regulate the entitlement program. All right. So that means that if you actually wanted to get the federal government entirely out of education, you would not only have to pass a bill to repeal the Department of Education Organization Act, you'd also need to pass at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other bills repealing other federal education laws. These include the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act, the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, which is in some ways actually more of the Department of Labor bill, but they have public-private partnerships through the Department of Labor and like the Office of Adult and Career and Technical Education for like career pathways stuff. But then another bill would be the Every Student Succeeds Act. You might throw the Carl Perkins bill in there as well. I didn't make it into my analysis, but I mean that's a wide enough survey of all the things in the way of getting rid of actually returning education to the states. Now,
because these appropriate funds. What people need to understand is these create mandates upon the states So if you provide schooling, education, you know, whether it be actual public schools or any schools you are sending tax money to. So if you start funding a private school, a charter school, it doesn't matter. These laws apply. The second a dollar of taxpayer money from your state is going to this given school, then you, the state, are on the hook for enforcing these laws. These laws apply to you. Now, they can't create an unfunded mandate, so they fund them. Congress appropriates funds, they fund these things, and now the state, if the state meets their criteria to get these funds, then the federal government sends them on to the state. But you don't just shutter the Department of Education and make these mandates go away because they're law, they're statute.
Right.
So I think a lot of Americans don't understand that. They think the Department of Education does something other than what it does. So get rid of it. These things still exist. They have to go somewhere. So now you detail where they're likely to go right here. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's laid out in Project 2025. So basically what it stipulates is that most of the entitlements would go to HHS, Health and Human Services, and the Department of Labor, with a few other departments filling in other roles. Those include the Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, Department of State. So the Office of Post-Secondary Education would go to HHS. The Office of Special Education Rehabilitative Services would also go to HHS. Office of Career and Technical and Adult Education would go to Department of Labor. Office of Civil Rights goes to Department of Justice. Institute of Education Sciences, which they've already cut lots and lots of money from, it's going to go to the Census Bureau of the Department of Commerce. So I mentioned those regional education labs. They used to be facilitated out of there. So it's funny because if having DOGE cut so much of that of the Institute of Education Sciences, it's like there's all that there would be money enough left for would be basically data collection of the entitlement programs. But in other words, all that other money would have been like regional. So I'm saying that cut and leaving that little drop is sort of in line with moving that to the Census Bureau of the Department of Commerce, because it's basically just to keep records. Okay. But if you watch the Linda McMahon hearing, they ask her, are you going to get rid of the entitlement fund? She says no, repeatedly. Okay, several times she says no. When they ask her about Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, she says, well, I don't know if it'd be better used at the HHS. When they ask her about how you're going to enforce Title IX, she said, well, I don't know if it'd be better enforced at DOJ. So everything that she said that they're planning to do is the stuff that's laid out in Project 2020.
Verbatim. Like it's almost like she was reading it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it was funny. I thought it was cute. I'm being sarcastic. Senator Britt, before they actually started questioning her, a couple people did their introduce the candidate, the nominee. Senator Britt comes out and goes, we need a change agent in education. Linda McMahon is a change agent. I imagine what the loaded term really means, right? I mean, so it's in some ways, your audience is probably very familiar with it. Essentially, it's a term that basically comes out of Rules for Radical, Saul Alinsky, community organizing. It's the idea that a change agent is someone that infiltrates an institution, pretends to represent the values of the institution, but subverts it. At the time was largely with communist socialist ideology, and that was sort of my mentor's foray into the world of education corruption. Was when she came back from she used to work in the State Department. She was in Middle Eastern affairs and Soviet affairs. She came back. She spent a long time overseas, came back home, saw that everything was, attended a school board meeting where people asked her something like, what do you think education should focus on? And she says, well, the Constitution and good morals and values. And everybody goes, whose morals, whose values, right? It was sort of the beginnings of sort of what they started to call values clarification, but now we might know it as like the woke, cultural studies, cultural Marxist stuff. And a friend of hers said, well, she wasn't her friend yet. They became good friends. She said, hey, you're onto something. I don't know if you know how onto it you are. I want you to go and I'm going to pay for you to take change agent training. So she went to this agency. And here's the book. That's the one that she had. It was the Change Agent's Guide. So I can't read it because it's backwards on the camera, right?
Guide to Innovation and Education.
And let's see, do I have these bookmarks? You should. So it's got these interesting like flow charts on how to infiltrate institutions. I'll try to show some of them without losing my marks. And like
how to infiltrate institute. Wow.
How to identify the resistors, how to use group dynamics to isolate them. Anyways, well, I don't mean to digress, but they call
no, but we've seen this in the school choice movement. We've seen this right there in the movement. If anybody, like Texas was doing pretty well, you know, advocating for an end to property taxes. Okay. Especially because no matter what they had tried in school reform, and they'd had school choice for a long time, just with different, you know, choices, lots of charters and all kinds of other things. Different, you could take your kid to a different public school and so on. And it wasn't helping. And so people were like, you know what? Let's start a movement to get rid of property tax. And it was gaining ground. And then in come these neocons and all these people. And now if they get these bills passed, goodbye getting rid of property taxes. That will literally never happen. So, and they've sent their little minions out to, you know, slander, libel, you know, abuse, stalk, harass, etc., and even primary solid Republicans right out of office to disrupt any opposition to what they're doing. And they claim that the people are behind them. They claim they have the electorate. They claim they have the votes of the people. They do not. That's demonstrably false. And yet they have so much money, a lot of it out of state too, going into this effort that they're just overwhelming the local people who are trying to fight back. And that in and of itself should give people pause. But I want to highlight something else that you said, because this is really important. After you go into like how it's going to go off to these different departments, I've had people say to me, well, so what's wrong with that, Deb? At least we don't have the Department of Education. Oh, well, how about this? These are Jake's words. In these ways, Project 2025's Department of Education Reorganization Act, that's what dismantle actually means, would actually expand rather than diminish government reaches into education, as 5 different federal agencies rather than a single department would be permitted authority over school systems. Meanwhile, the ed employees whose positions are determined to be essential to the mission would move with their constituent programs to the newly appointed departments, so much of the bureaucratic personnel will remain the same. If you thought they were getting fired, probably not. At the same time, by yoking education to HHS and the DOL, Project 2025's restructuring of the ed would basically revert the federal bureaucracy into a system that harkens back to the days of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, which implemented centralized planning, programming, and budgeting systems as the precursor, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, if you think this is automatically improving education or reducing the size and scope of government or federal power into the states, you've got it exactly backwards. If you're worried about how much the government's getting involved in your child's mental health through schools, you're throwing gasoline on a fire.
Yeah, you know, and by the way, again, it's another thing that she said during the interview. She says, well, you know, it used to be HEW. Maybe it should go back to like that. She says it several times. By the way, this came out the morning before she was in the hearing. So I didn't write this after she said it. I wrote it before and she confirmed everything in it. Okay. But to your point, like, look, if you're going to have any federal agency in charge of education, I personally prefer it to be one called education, so that at least ostensibly you would probably hope that it would be focused on academics. If you send it to HHS and labor, like to your point, why wouldn't I assume that that's going to increase the medicalization of learning? Why wouldn't I assume that that's going to increase the mental health aspects in data mining? Why wouldn't I assume that that's going to increase more social emotional learning? Maybe they'll give it a different name now, right? So that we don't want to use the DEI letters or the SEL letters, right? But
we'll call it resilience.
Yeah.
We'll call it resilience.
Yeah. That's another one of the indexes that they use for these other types of social credit indexes, right? And same thing for labor, right? I mean, you know, if you'd like your child to be learning more academics than workforce training, if you'd like them to be treated like, you know, a mind instead of a human resource, I would prefer that department not to be the Department of Labor. So, you know, I think that they want to break it up in that way. on purpose. I think that it would streamline pay for success, impact investing, because it would be easier to sort of track and trace and oversee pay for success for mental health outcomes or pay for success for workforce outcomes. So I think this is a strategic move.
Yeah. Well, the problem is we still have people who refuse to believe this because during the campaign, Trump individually said, I've never read it. I don't have anything to do with it. It's not mine. Whatever. And a lot of us, myself included, backed him up on that he wasn't a signatory or writer. He wasn't campaigning on it. He wouldn't say anything about it. But where the rubber meets the road is, what does the guy do when he gets elected? Okay. So none of us knew who he was going to pick for Secretary of Education. None of us knew he was going to nominate for his cabinet positions before he did it, with a couple of notable exceptions. But it was always, like, who's he going to pick? Who's he going to pick? And so, whether he personally wanted this or even understands it is really irrelevant at this point. We are now not dealing anymore with like the leftist press is pushing blah, 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 blah. Okay. He's won now. He's the president now. It is absolutely right, correct, fair, everything to judge him by his actions, by his choices, and the people that he's chosen by their actions, their choices, their words, etc. And I think at this point, it is absolutely ridiculous for anybody to say, at least where education is concerned. I can't speak to the other policies. I'm only focused narrowly on education on this channel. But where education is concerned, there is no question in my mind that whether he realizes it or not, he has put Project 2025 into play by virtue of his choices of people to be in his cabinet at the helm of the departments to which these funds and bureaucrats will go when he, quote unquote, dismantles the Department of Education. His choice of Linda McMahon, his choice of Penny What's-Her-Hole. These people make no secret of the fact that they support this, even if they don't invoke the term Project 2025. Is it really, it's a distinction without a difference. If somebody's sitting there telling you, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this, and you pick up Project 2025 and you go, that's what it says here. Literally, like verbatim, this is what the words are in the document. You don't anymore get to say, you're a leftist shilling for the left, because they tried to misinform us, say bad things. And I'm like, guys, it's not the campaign anymore. We're in governing territory now. We're doing stuff.
Didn't you know that for the first 2 years of every administration, you get to blame everything on the previous administration? It's not until after midterms that everybody has to pretend like anything happens for left and right. I mean, my whole life, that's what it's been. But I didn't know that you weren't allowed to say that anymore, because a lot of people said that to me for 2 days straight. When it came out, I got called a libtard many times.
Yeah,
I got called a Marxist. I got told to get the F out of the country, and I also got tagged in a tweet where someone tagged Elon Musk suggesting that I'm taking money from USAID and need to be
wow.
I told you. If you want to look at my tiny bank accounts, have at it. Be my guest. But let me say something. I didn't say this beforehand, because before he got in, but I kind of saw the way the winds were going, and I looked at it because I knew everything you said. I said, I'm not going to say anything until he gets in. Let's see what happens. But when he did, yeah, pretty much what I thought. But I didn't buy him saying he didn't know anything about it, and I'll tell you why. Because Charlotte Iserbyt told me when she was in the Department of Education, first thing you get if you're in a Republican administration at the White House, first thing you get on day one is a pamphlet from the Heritage Foundation laying out the playbook, which is what they even called it, this one, the playbook, mandate for leadership, for what your department is going to be doing. Okay. That's how it's been since Heritage basically is the policy setting arm of the Republican Party. The way it was before she was there, it's the way it was while she was there, it's the way it is now. And I know that I'm sure that Trump had that experience, and I'll tell you how else I know that. because the guy, one of the key people on his transition team was Edwin Meese. Edwin Meese was also in the Reagan administration. So it's not just the same institution and the same party. It's the same people involved. I've never bought that he didn't believe, that he didn't know anything. He might not have read it. I hear he doesn't read much at all, but
no, I don't doubt that he didn't read it, nor do I doubt that he doesn't really know how it works. Most people, never mind Donald Trump, don't understand how education works in America.
Yeah. Well, as we just laid out, right? I mean, I mentioned two different bills. A department that's been restructured 3 times. By the way, the Department of HEW. Before that, we've had federal education since the mid 1800s. Okay, we had an Office of Education. It was part of the Department of Interior, and that was largely because of the Morrill Land Grant Act. They wanted to give out plots of land so they could build up the colleges for the teaching, the teaching department, so they could get the pedagogy, the behaviorism, and the Hegelian collectivism in there, and then brainwash all of the particular normal, what they called normal schools. So the schools that teach teachers how to teach, and then they would take those methodologies and they'd set them down there. And then eventually, once we got compulsory ed and we had sort of the infrastructure built, then we came up with HEW, which is governed by at least 5 other bills. So I mean, you know, it's like I said, it's a labyrinth, right? And I don't expect people to really be able to slice and dice it all apart. I mean, this is many, many years of me mapping things, like, to be able to even navigate my way through it. But, I should note that, if you think again, that MAGA is somehow not part of the old Republican establishment. We don't have to go quite that far back, but let's just say that, did he learn his swamp lessons? I don't think so, because all of the state policy network think tanks behind Project 2020, they're all swamp creatures. And 2 of the people that are on Project 2025 worked for the DeVos Department of Education. So again, right? I mean, it's more of the same, going back from the previous swamp administration, going back all the way to the think tanks that have driven the Republican Party for at least half a century.
Right. And I think what's really frustrating is we have so many people who think that that the purpose of education is to get you a job. So they might even watch the show and say, I don't even get what your problem is. So the government wants to put in place, like, this whole system that will make it easier for kids to get hooked up with a career and all these kind of things. And why is that bad? And then I had to stop and say, well, I don't know. When you had your child, mom, when you gave birth, dad, when you first looked at the face of your infant child, whatever, did you look down at them and say, I can't wait to hand you to the state and have them decide what your job's going to be someday based on what somebody else needs you to do? I'm so excited. That's the American dream, is to hand you, unique sovereign individual, over to a system to define based on how you perform on its curriculum, its tests, using its machines to its specifications, what your whole life will look like. Yes, that's definitely my dream for you. I'm pretty sure that doesn't align with America as I understood it. I thought the pursuit of happiness was an individual pursuit, was something that we looked down at our kids, we're like, I wonder who you're going to be someday. And I can't wait to get to know you, little new person who has their own ideas and own soul and own being. But this will take that away from you. You hand your kid over, probably in some preschool setting at this point, what they're going to go, free preschool for everybody. And by the age of 3, your child's going to be plugged into this matrix. And will they even know what they like and they want by the time they're 6? Or will it have been steered through adaptive or artificial intelligence so that the only things they see, the only things they experience, the skills that they learn, the skills that they're good at, etc., meet someone else's needs who isn't them?
Yeah, well, I mean, and to your point, it's not just, if you look at it like, oh, it's going to get them from, if the destination is work, job, career, it's going to get them from point A to point B. But real learning, right? It's not the shortest distance from point A to point B, right? A lot of learning is kind of haphazard. It comes, right? You take a detour, you make a mistake, right? You learn things that when I'm doing the Coke thing I mentioned, right? The Quincy Institute. I did not intend to learn that. I wasn't looking for that, right? But it opened up a whole nother paradigm for me to analyze the data that I'm looking at. So in other words, if the algorithms are just trying to funnel the student towards the career pathway, there's all kinds of other curiosities they're going to miss along the way. I remember getting through most of undergrad and realizing, like, man, I really have an interest for history. Right? Like at that point, like, no, you already finished your career pathway. Get in the pod and pull the lever, or or click the GPT AI button or whatever it is. So, maybe
it's already hard for people. Think of all the kids who were told, go to college, get a college degree, and success will be, like that's how you'd get to success. So a lot of people followed that path, went to college, picked a major they thought would get them a good job. Maybe it was econ, maybe it was marketing, maybe it was communicate, whatever. They picked a major based on what they thought the job was going to be. And lo and behold, it doesn't magically happen that way, or it didn't work out, or they were miserable, or they were sitting in a pod like a little veal and going, I hate this life. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. I'm snorting coke. I'm drinking. I'm eating whatever I'm doing. I'm not a happy person. And they decide, I'd like to not be doing this anymore. But what the problem is, I got these big loans I got to pay. So I can't just go pursue my bliss and pursue my happiness, because now I have to pay my student loans. And then people go, well, they're coming and complaining they can't pay their student loans. But instead of going to the schools of higher ed and saying, y'all sold these students on this major, or maybe they majored in gender studies, God forbid, and they can't pay off their loans, they can't just shift gears. It's not that easy to just like change your mind. The kids who are best off are the ones who didn't follow the path at all, have no debt. And they, basically the world is their oyster. If they want to go back to school, they can. If they don't want to, they can pursue something else. But the ones who got sucked into this kind of system of do what we think, what we say, go to college, career and college promise, a lot of them are disaffected, depressed, miserable, in a cycle of, I got to work to pay the bills, to pay the loans, to pay the debts, and they're not happy. They're not as free as they otherwise would be, because they got already sucked into what the state said would be best for them, which was college. And that's a public-private partnership, because remember, they turned what was private loans into a federal program, right? Obama did that. So now that it's a federal program, everybody's pressuring them to make that easier. No one's pressuring the colleges. What I would expect to happen at the K-12 level, Jake, is that when they start funding all these corporations, they aren't going to go to the corporations when things don't work out all swell, right? They're going to go to the government and start saying, wah, we need more entitlements to pay for all the things that didn't work out exactly right. And who's going to go back to the corporation that was already remunerated, or they already got to collect their profits, or maybe they've folded up shop and, checked their little box and retired to an island in, Fiji or something. And who's going to take care of your kid then? So this takes autonomy and agency away from the child, away from the family, while they're busy going, the dollars follow the child. We're giving freedom back to parents.
Yeah, that's the euphemism that's the slogan, right? Fund children, not buildings. Well, that's actually worse. It's actually way more pernicious, because if you fund the building and the building isn't doing a good job, you take your child out of the building and you put it in one, right? Don't take the ESA money, right? You find a way, either homeschool, but put it somewhere that's not in the failing school. If you attach the money to the student, doesn't matter where the student goes, the same regulations apply, same curriculum is going to apply, same mandates are going to apply. So at that point, you have nowhere to go at that point.
Right. And people will say to me, so are you saying you would prefer to keep the status quo than add school choice? And so like, well, obviously no, but I'm the one who started the show by saying, I don't accept the premise that government should be doing any of this. And then for those of you who say, well, you're making the perfect the enemy of the good because we're stuck with it. This is the system. Well, if you're going to go there, if you're going to force me square peg, round hole into the notion that the government owns a school education and nothing we can do about it, then yes, then my answer is yes. At least if it's one track of public schools that's getting taxpayer dollars, that means the rest of the dollars that aren't going to this system are still out floating in the actual free market, or at least mostly free market. And guess what, parents? The same choice you have today to go take whatever other money you could possibly have to go to a truly private school, a parochial school, homeschool your kids, hire tutors, whatever, is still literally yours. But you go with this system, not only will there be fewer dollars left freely circulating in something called an education market, it will be all under government's control, but you're instead of giving yourself more choices, you're giving government more choices. So yes, if I have to choose, if you're going to make me choose, what I would prefer is for people to instead say, no, I want less. I don't want any of this. I don't want this. Get out. Get out. Let us at a local level decide what we want to do. Okay. So if it's in Texas, let Dallas decide what it wants its public option to be and how it wants to pay for it. The federal government shouldn't have any role in it at all. And honestly, I don't think a whole state should decide what a whole state should do. What Houston needs is going to be different from what Plano needs. And I think the more you centralize it, the worse it gets. And the incentives are all in the wrong place. So if you're going to force me, I'm going to say, yeah, you have more control over fixing it if you keep it in one lane.
Yeah, well, I will say, at a certain level, I kind of can sympathize with people that I feel like they traumatize people with the woke critical theory, all this stuff,
Sure.
lockdowns so bad for the last 4 or 5 years, probably longer if you're talking woke stuff, that anything that looks or seems like it's not that's an alternative, let's have it, right? But
It couldn't possibly have been intentional.
I was, that's the other part. That's and the other,
surely not.
Whenever I would watch Fox or Newsmax or any news broadcast that was right of center, there was 3 things that they talked about in education: critical race theory, gender ideology, and unions are bad. That's it.
And it's all true. Doesn't not make it true, but understand crisis creation and how that all works. Is it, what sells school choice really well? This version of school choice. What sells it? What kind of crisis do we need to have? So again, this notion that somehow these problems at woke or critical race theory or whatever just spontaneously erupted in the schools is ludicrous. Republicans have their fingers all over this. No Child Left Behind. Hello. Even before that, like you said, Ronald Reagan. I mean, this is not party specific. They have all been, batting that pendulum back and forth, and it always moves forward, guys. Remember, James Lindsay explained that to us. It doesn't just go back and forth. It keeps going forward. And the Republicans at no time have stepped in and said, we're going to just put a stop to this. Like, for real. We're going to stop collecting money for this. We're going to completely shutter everything. We're going to repeal these laws. And we're going to tell the states, run your own education. We're done. Yeah. At no time have I heard a Republican say anything resembling that. But that's true republicanism.
Right. And here, let me note this real quick before I forget. This is an important one. So Senator Blunt Rochester questioned McMahon about ESAs, basically. And the question was, this was the best question out of the entire hearing. Everything else was, I don't want to say it was a moot question, but this was the one that actually, and she didn't answer it. She asked her would they accept if a private school takes an ESA dollar, will they be required to enroll students with disabilities? In other words, she's saying, if a school takes ESAs, will they be federally regulated? She started a filibuster and dodge it. And Blunt Rochester tried to pin her down and says, can you just give me a yes or no? Well, I don't think it's a yes or no answer. It's like, okay, I don't have time for this. You can pen in your response and, send it to me later. I want to get to more questions, but she didn't say no. So to your point, you're saying like, you haven't heard anybody just say, you know what, we're going to get rid of the department. We're going to get rid of the entitlements. We're going to send it back to the states. The federal government's not going to have anything to say or do about it. That's right.
Well, I can tell you right now, she can't say, she didn't answer because she knows perfectly well that the 14th Amendment, it'll take one lawsuit.
Yeah.
And the 14th Amendment is going to ensure that they have to take, if they take ESAs, they're going to have to take students with disabilities. There's not going to be any way around it. And two things will happen. Schools that are not equipped to do it, that don't want to do it, etc., will either go out of business if they're private schools, or they will not be able to take these ESA funds, which means that they will be just for the people who can afford to pay this tuition on their own. That's it. Like, there won't be, those private schools will not be accessible. And those private schools that currently give scholarships, financial aid, because they can kind of afford to, because there is all that money floating around in the market and people are donating and so forth. Once so much money is kind of co-opted by the government for this solution, that won't be there anymore either. So what I would expect to happen is that the private schools that still have exclusive applications and standards and so forth will become for the very rich. Just the very rich. You won't even have scholarship kids except for sports. Okay. And then all the other schools will have to come under the umbrella of being just like the public schools. And the only difference might be at that point that they might be, permitted to have a religion class or something, which of course will also be mediated by the fact that they have to include SEL. Catholic schools are already doing it. Catholic schools are already including SEL. And that's before ESAs. Or they're going to have to send their kids out to a public school to get their services. And then what the hell is the difference? So by the way, that already happens too. So she can't answer they won't have to, because she knows perfectly well the Constitution will force them to.
Sure. And there's no way to answer that question where if she says yes, then the people on the right that are savvy are going to go, she just said they're going to regulate private schools. If she says no, people on the left and hopefully people on the right as well are going to be like, she's not going to get help to people with disabilities. So there's no way to answer that question truthfully or lying in a way that pleases anybody, right? And the other indication that they're not getting rid of federal education is what's one of the big things that's really got people happy is he's getting men out of women's sports. How's he doing that? With Title IX. Well, I guess you're going to have to keep that entitlement then.
Thank you. I tried to explain that to people. I was like, his only leverage is money, guys. Yeah. And truly private schools, by the way, truly private schools at the state level can flip him the bird. If they don't want to, if they don't currently take federal dollars, or if they don't want the students to have access to the federal loans or whatever, they can flip them the bird if they want to. If they can come up with another way to fund those things, they can say no. But right now they take the money, so they can't say no. And he knows that. So he's using it as leverage. And no, go ahead. Well, no, I mean, I was just going to say that it's super frustrating because I have a lot of sympathy, as you said, too, for the parents whose kids aren't learning. They're not getting the education that they need, or the parents don't have, the money's been taken, so they don't have the means necessarily to go find another solution. They're single parents. They have dual income household, whatever. And so they're mad at me because I'm giving them news they don't want, right? They're like, I was counting on this and I don't like you and I want it to work. And I understand that, but you have to decide what's the most important thing. And I hope it's your kid. I mean, I really hope it's like your child actually learning. And if you genuinely believe that setting up this whole thing is going to lead, you remember your kid's gonna be in school if they're young now, the 13 years, that this is going to result in something better, then I would want you to show me evidence to support that belief. Right. Because I've yet to see a program that the government co-opted, started getting involved in, took over, subsidized, they didn't get more expensive and worse quality. And you tell me, is it fair to compare this to Obamacare?
I don't know how I would make the comparison, but I will say that Obama was one of the biggest promoters of charter schools. He was
yes, that's true.
Bloomed under him. He had Arnie Duncan, his Secretary of Ed, basically privatized almost the entire public school system in Chicago. So,
how'd that work out?
Then they had their promise academies and things like that as well. Well,
the reason I compared it is they said that they were going to create this exchange for people to get a subsidy to go buy insurance, not from the government, but from private corporations, right? And that this was going to bring the costs down. This was called the Affordable Care Act. So the idea was, by giving you that subsidy to go buy the insurance, and like public school, we're going to now require you to do that. Just like you're required to go to school. So we're going to require you to have the insurance that we're going to subsidize you buying. But it's okay that we're requiring it, because now we're subsidizing that you can go buy it. And the price will come down and everyone will have access. And people said it's going to affect quality. It's going to skew the market. It's going to force people all to come under the same, regulatory arm. And no. If you want to keep your doctor, keep your doctor. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. This is all going to be fine. Well, guess what happened to my insurance plan? Our family plan went from like $800 a month for a family plan up to $2,200 a month. I wouldn't call that affordable. OPS, less quality, like the coverage was less. And the wait times for all our doctors went up. Some doctors just stopped practicing, just to be like, I'm out, bye. Others had to sell out their practices to giant medical corporations. And now they maybe spend 7 minutes with you in a room on a computer.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, as you were speaking, first you said, if you like your doctor, you keep your doctor. Hey, you sound like Corey DeAngelis. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school.
If you like your private school, you can keep your private school.
But the other thing is,
it won't change.
You know who came up with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, the think tank where that originated from before it got piloted by Romney, the Heritage Foundation. Oh, imagine that. So I guess it is a good analogy to have. I didn't think about it like that, but I guess it is. Let me say too, be very wary of anything that this administration suggests to you, any reform, any policy that they offer to you, when the basis of it is it's going to get rid of some DEI woke stuff. To me, that's like the new, it's like, I smell some DEI in there. Elon, get the chainsaws, and I just think like that's going to be the thing that they use to do, to make a lot of reforms that, you might be out of the frying pan into the fire with it. So I just, right. That, to your point about sort of, I mean, they've literally driven people crazy with the whole, woke DEI stuff. I mean, it's very easy to goad people at this point. So.
Well, there's that. And then there's also the idea that, I think a lot of people who are afraid of DEI don't really even understand what it is and where it originated, in the sense that they assume it's exclusively the left, Marxist, et cetera. They assume that there isn't sort of a business incentive. Remember with the SDG goals, ESG, the UN, and so on, which is, not really a partisan issue. That's globalist. I will say that. But people forget there are plenty of Republicans who are globalists. Abbott's a globalist. I mean, my goodness, the Bushes are globalists. This idea that they are, this America first, that's a talking point to get you under their spell, but they're not. They're globalists. So, when you think like this is going to get rid of DEI, I don't think people understand how embedded it is. And the other thing is the education industrial complex, the teaching of teachers, all the research, instructional methodology, AI for teachers, adaptive learning, the wearables, all that. What do you think the ideology is of 90+% of the people involved in that endeavor? I know, because I used to be in it. I wasn't one of them. That's why I left. But talk to teachers, in any random school. So human teachers are primarily on board with government monitoring everything under the sun. They think it's better. And certainly parents don't know what's best for their kids. They do. The teacher educators do. The universities and the teacher colleges do. And so on and so forth. There isn't some magical supply of humans who have the right philosophy and the right ideology, et cetera, to be newly involved in a new system of education or a new pathway of it called school choice, that are going to instruct or teach or monitor or administer education for your children who are aligned with your values. The only person you can guarantee is you. These people don't exist. There's not some supply of teachers out there who are
Well,
all, right leaning.
that's why I was, you know, trying to pointing out when you were talking about sort of this left right thing with school choice, and the basically using the woke stuff to drive people into it. When I was looking, as I mentioned, I'd look at the Fox, I'd look at Newsmax, etc., and they'd put those 3 talking points, unions bad, woke stuff bad, critical theory, gender theory, but there was never, ever, 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 ever a discussion about data mining. There's never any, even during the peak of lockdowns, when Tucker Carlson would mention things about social credit once in a while, I was like, whoa, that's the first time I heard that on TV before. Even though they dropped that in there, it's all about China. We're not doing it over here. Don't worry. And certainly not the Republicans and the right wingers, right?
Right.
That was always very telling to me. It was always very telling to me. And I knew, look, when I wrote the book, Charlotte always intuited that school choice would be instrumental in basically removing our elected form of government through the public-private partnerships, right? So basically, she argued that if you could whittle away at the locally elected public school board through these public-private partnerships and then bringing in government regulations into private institutions, that essentially you would whittle away at our civil process.
Yes.
During the Biden thing, I saw a big push for the community schools, and that was largely what I focused on. I didn't, I almost towards the end of mid 2024, I kind of saw the tide shifting, but I was almost thinking like, maybe I got that school choice thing. I was a little off on how far that was going to go down the pipe. Nope, that one's coming right back. And to tie it back into the community schools, just so you know that the left, right, the legs are both stepping in the same direction. I think that the end, in my analysis, when I say think, this isn't just like, I'm speculating. I mean, like looking at all the data and drawing the vectors and seeing where they converge down the line. Their ideal system is the community charter school system. What that means is it's a private company charter school that operates wraparound services, but the bulk of the education you're actually getting is going to be online at home. So you're only going to go to the wraparound services to get some lab work, maybe some workforce training, maybe some PE, maybe some mental health treatments or something. But the bulk of what you're going to get is going to be the government and corporations data mining your children inside your house, using your house as sort of the hub. All of this geared towards essentially socially engineering human capital resources for the social credit economy. To go back to the whole PPBS thing in the Macy's cybernetics, like this has always been sort of the game plan. It's to basically take the group dynamics in the classroom and make those sync up with the systems dynamics of big business, big government, and technology.
Right. And what would you say to parents who say, well, they can't do that because I have to go to work, so I'm not going to be in the house. I can't supervise my kids sitting on a computer and da, 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 da. Well, we certainly tested that out during lockdowns, didn't we?
Charlotte told me a story where I wish I could remember the guy that she was talking to, and she told me a lot of stories that I heard, several times, and wish I'd have took better notes sometimes because she's not here, and we'd be talking. Sometimes she'd say, "Write it down." She'd say, "Write it down." But she told me a story. I don't remember if the guy was in the department, but somebody showed her. This has got to be early 80s. A program. It was some kind of ed tech, some computer assisted learning program. It was a math program, and she said it was developed with in partnership with the National Education Association, which is interesting, right? It's a union. But she said, "Oh, well, that's kind of neat." She was like, "Man," she's like, you wouldn't even need to go to the classroom for that." And this person who was an important person, like I said, I wish I remember what it said. Charlotte, in the future, all education will be done in the home. And I think that, they always kind of had this fourth industrial revolution. They knew where all the emerging technologies were sort of going to converge. Just looking at something like Ray Kurzweil looks at the law of accelerating returns, they could see the exponential rate at which the processing power doubled over time. So you could say that, hey, by this point in time will have this much computing power. You know, somebody like Zbigniew Brzezinski in, I can't remember the title of the book. It's right there. It's something about the technotronic era. He wrote it in the 70s. He's predicting, right, the rise of the computer, what we now call the fourth industrial revolution. He's basically saying, like, you know, we have all the technology that we really need to actually more or less track everything. He says what we don't have is the processing power to actually analyze all that data, right? That we have to wait. I'm sort of skipping the curve here, right? We have to wait for those transistors, right, and the microprocessors to evolve, right? So they could sort of plan that, hey, in 20, 30 years, this is when, right, the public-private partnerships will merge with the technology and the government will sort of facilitate this this whole project. So, you know, I have a thing here. This is interesting. I don't know if I can.
Remember, they also want us to have fewer kids. So at some point, they're going to decide who gets to even have these children.
I wish you probably can't read that very good.
No, I can't see it too well. It's pretty.
I could put on my document cam, but it'll
yeah,
it's not hooked up right.
But I mean, what I was just saying though is, you know, right now they're already trying to tell us that certain people shouldn't have kids. They're already, you know, like steering us in the direction where they want more babies, but born to certain kinds of people. Right? They want, you know, they're telling parents who, you know, where they're single parents, whatever, that they should abort or they should get married to the person, you know, like which, depending which side you're talking to. But the bottom line is, don't think for a second that the system that will do this and has the power to do this isn't going to also be telling your children who and when and where and why they should themselves have children. So by the time this gets to be that situation where everything's done in the home, the people who are having kids will be able to either hook them up to wearables and have them supervised by some kind of nanny cam or in all living in apartment buildings in a 15-minute city. So we don't need to worry about, you know, one parent being in the home because there'll be like a building oriented care room or who knows what. But, you know, think completely outside the box here. These are people who are trying to get you to not own your own home because reasons. These are people who are trying to get you to have fewer babies because reasons. So it all flows from there. Ride public transportation. And you might say, no, those are the left. That's only the left. The right wants me to have lots of babies. Do they? Really? Or is that a talking point for an election? Follow their feet. Don't listen to their words. Follow their investments. Look at what they're investing in. They're investing in this.
Well, yeah, that, and I was gonna. I wish I could have showed you the graph, but you don't need to see it. I can break this down. So I have a document here, Charlotte. It's one of the documents I inherited from her files in her library. So the Educational Excellence Coalition was petitioned by the National Education Association. Particularly, it's the person that was part of the EEC was Jim Spady. He was one of these World Future Society people. Okay, so he's sort of a new ager and a futurist. The document is called 4 Scenarios for the Future of Public Education in Seattle. Published 1994. Report prepared by Global Business Network. It's a scenario planning document. Okay. It's looking in the document. It talks about basically using school choice and funding students directly. And it talks about needing to, it says basically we have all the equipment we need. He says, what we really need to change is the perception of, they use the term wetware. That means people. Okay.
Ew.
And in it, they say that in doing this, in making this reform happen, we might bring in Paul Hill of the Rand Corporation. But if you didn't know, the Rand Corporation has several white papers on school choice. Some of them in the 80s, some of them in the 90s. They have one on ESAs that it's not that many years old, just a few years old. Okay. Now, here's why here's where it gets a little more ominous. Okay. The Global Business Network, scenario planning is another thing that was created by the Rand Corporation. It's just a way to sort of, they take from data mining and feedback loops, right? They can they take a quadrant of 4 scenarios, A, B, C, and D. There's an ideal one, there's a least ideal, and then right through the feedback loop, they can track which outcome they're trying to get to. So in this document, there's 4 scenarios. The change is the one that they want. This is the one that's basically the school choice thing. They don't use terms like ESAs and things in there, but this is, if you read it, this is what they're talking about. Global Business Network was also the organization that partnered with the Rockefeller Foundation to publish the Lockstep document. Do you remember the Lockstep document? It was called 4 Scenarios for the Future of Technology and I think International Development or something like that. This is what these companies do, right? They take 10, 20, 30-year plans. They run scenario planning narratives on it. Then they do something called action research, which was created by Kurt Lewin. He's out of the Frankfurt School, all that, that cultural Marxist, that whole milieu. Okay. And action research is where you make the first step towards achieving the ideal scenario. You get the data for what happened in response. You get the feedback loop, and then you make an adjustment and you try to, zero in on your ideal scenario. So I'm saying that, listen, think about lockdowns. They had what we call now the Lockstep document, basically a script for what they did, wasn't it? If you read that Lockstep scenario, I don't want to on YouTube, so I won't specify the things they made us do, but we all remember, right?
Yes, we do.
Same thing, but education. Okay. And the RAND Corporation has been intimately involved. So part of what I'm getting at too is think about Palantir, right? This is as much a military industrial complex operation that the data mine, as much as it is for creating good little worker bees and human resources and funnel them into their career pathways so they could streamline the 4th industrial revolution. There's also remember Ellison talking about basically pre-crime, right?
Yeah.
This is built into it as well, right? The data that they're getting, it's not just to make you fulfill their economic outcomes. It's for their national security stuff. It's for their biosecurity. It's for their health outcomes. And they've been thinking about it for a very long time.
Do you know what the creepiest part of it is for me? I mean, there's so many creepy parts. It's hard to pick one, but I think for me, it's how obvious it is that every single one of the people involved in this seems oblivious to the fact that the very existence of their systems fundamentally changes the person in the system. So in other words, the idea that the child is a literal blank slate. They're just a lump of clay, and I can plug them into my system and I can BF Skinner them into, whatever. And that what they come to me with is so blank that there's nothing else they could have been that was better. There's nothing that I'm interfering with. There's no negative outcome that I'm going to perceive that is my fault. In other words, just like they're saying right now, parents, when you look at your child, your potentially very bright little toddler who was babbling like crazy and oh, I got all kinds of ideas and I have all things to say and I want to learn how to tie my shoes and tell time and do all the things and I'm counting to 10 and I'm so excited to learn. And then, 1 year into school, they're like, this, whatever. Okay. And then they, 2 years later, I hate reading. Reading is stupid. Why do I need to learn this? This is so dumb. And by the time they're in high school, they're, this cynical, apathetic, hardly know anything, can't tell time, whatever. We already are complaining about that your child was turned into that. They were changed by the horrible, system and education and locked in a room and made to do things that they, in a way that they weren't interested in and so on. Why? Why would you think? Why would any of these people think that what they're about to do to children with all of their high-tech gobbledygook isn't going to have similarly horrific outcomes? Remember, they said you can stay home, put on a mask, go to virtual school, everything will be fine. Remember how much we said it's going to interfere with learning? Do you remember how much we said it was going to interfere with speech and emotions and cause all kinds of disruption with these children? Now you're paranoid. That's crazy, blah, blah, blah. Now they turn around like it was their idea. Oh, well, because of COVID, we have all these problems. You mean the problems you created? The problems we told you were going to happen if you followed these policies? Well, so now here we're looking at all the tech bros and all the school choice people and all these people who say that everything they're going to do is going to be better. And it never seems to occur to them the possibility that they're wrong and the possibility that they're going to make matters worse. And every parent I talk to goes, but it's going to be better because money. And I'm like, when was money the solution to all your problems? When? Ever? When?
Yeah. Oh, you have to forgive me. This is my long day, and I've been punched in the
No,
head
I'm
many times
sorry.
with my martial arts over the year. I had it. I was going to take a note before I forgot it. And I lost what I was gonna add.
No, but I was babbling, but I get so fired up about this, Jake, because the assumptions that people have
Oh, I
that
remember.
make
But go
this
ahead.
okay are, and I'm sitting there going, what if you're wrong?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the thing about so in the ECCA bill, they
Yes.
specifically stipulate, and I've seen this in other state bills for ESAs and tax credits, et cetera, is that the money can be used for, quote, learning loss. They mean lockdown, that word, learning loss. If you it's a buzz phrase. If you type in learning, I bet you if you just did a general Google search or any search engine of learning loss in quote, and to hit the news filter, most of the articles that you would read would be referring to learning loss as a result of lockdowns and masking, etc. So it's just another one of these ways where it's like, it's all of the craziness of the last 4 years were really really useful in getting people to jump into this new basket. And another reason why I think that this not just the charter schooling, it's not just the privatization and the profiteering and all that, but the attaching the money to the student, the money to the student. Because, and by the way, so my next article is going to look at one of the guys that is one of the authors of the chapter of Project 2025 that's titled Department of Education. His name is Jonathan Butcher. He's at Heritage Foundation. He wrote a piece 2017, 2018 or something like that, on using fintech to issue and administer the ESAs. And he's basically saying like, well, that's to make sure that, you don't just get so the parents don't spend it on stuff they shouldn't spend it on. Okay. And, well, think fintech. Well, I don't know. Who's the original fintech? I don't know. The PayPal mafia, like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. But so when they talk, so the basket he lays out is like, Class Wallet and Benefit Wallet and a few others. Now these are more or less just vehicles for transferring funds. It's not crypto blockchain, but he mentions it in there. And if you were to issue that on a blockchain, then you're talking about programmable money. You're talking about money that gets tracked and traced in terms of every person that it moves to. In other words, if they want to get predictive analytics, you'd have to get it for the comprehensive biopsychosocial algorithms, right? So the thinking algorithms, the feeling algorithms, the behavioral algorithms, right? All that for each student. And you want to aggregate it onto a centralized blockchain ledger, right? A centralized database. You want it all on. So that would be what you want the blockchain for. I think it was Ellison or somebody, but they were talking about, it was in the context of health data. They're like, right now they're in so many different databases, we can't really get a good read on our analytics. We need them all.
Boo-hoo.
So if you do that with each student, you'll have all their data on one ledger. Each institution can have all its data on one ledger. So then you can get the feedback loops, right, between the service and the student, the educational service and the student, and are the outcomes working? Are they getting on track to their career pathway? But you can also track the patterns and the flow of the currency, and the currency, right? Because if it's got that, right, if it's blockchain and it's programmable, it's right every step it goes. So then what they can do with that is for the pay for success, they can get a much more accurate measurement in terms of quantifying learning outcomes in terms of these other social metrics. So one of the things that they do for pay for success is they say it's not just that, right? Good educational outcomes correlate economically in terms of welfare, healthcare, criminal justice, meaning if students don't do so good in school, they got all these statistics that say that you're more likely to go to jail, be mentally ill, or need welfare. All that stuff costs us taxpayer dollars. So, right, by tracking the patterns of the coins, right, we can actually we get a better sense of like how your learning outcomes actually translated into saved money elsewhere. But the other part is the Skinnerian part, which is the operant conditioning. The fundamental aspect of it is, right, a routine schedule based on punishments and rewards, right?
Yep.
So and punishments and rewards that are extrinsic or external, right? Which is, you mentioned how unhappy people are in the system. That's because everything is extrinsically motivated. They have no intrinsic motivation to learn anything. And so, right. And the extrinsic motivators are like a gold star and stay out of detention. Right. But hey, what if that extrinsic motivator is money? What if it's coins, right? I mean, if there's anything that will condition people to behave in particular ways, it's cut off their money. Right. So this is
absolutely
another way that I think it's another reason why the ESAs and the vouchers are so important to the fourth industrial revolution, is because it's going to usher in this blockchain, crypto, digital currency economy where the programmable tokens are only going to be used either for your health. Oh, this is for your Medicare token. This is your education token. This is, you name it. Okay. And all of that is all geared towards streamlining their social credit analytics.
Well, I think one of the most powerful things you've helped me understand today that I hadn't thought of was, I always thought I hated the talking point of let the dollars follow the student, right? I just didn't like the talking point because I knew that's not what was really happening. But I hadn't taken it to the next level, which you've just educated me about it, that when those dollars are following the student rather than the building, that means the government's following your child individually. And to that level, like right now, the kid goes in the building. As long as the kid's in the building, the government is following that child through all the data it's collecting. However, like you said, if they leave that school and they go to a private school or they homeschool, whatever, then the data gathering gets cut off, or it's only the education data. It's not also the healthcare data. It's not, that's what Obamacare ushered in, is now they got all that too, but it's not also their spending patterns. It's not also all those things. By having this money follow the kid, they can literally surveil your child's every decision. And that to me, why a parent would find that to be a selling point is beyond my comprehension.
And in addition to Thiel and PayPal, who else is wanting to get into fintech? I don't know. Maybe Elon Musk, who wants X to be like the WhatsApp that basically,
he wants it to be the one app to rule them all. He wants you to basically run your life off of X. Yeah. People think he came up with the name X like last year when he bought Twitter. Nuh-uh. He bought that years ago. He's been planning this for years. Mm-hmm. So this is not, people tell me, why are you so down on Elon Musk? Why are you so mistrustful of Elon Musk? I'm like, do you have any clue what this guy's ulterior motives are? Why do you worship him? Why do you put him on this freaking pedestal?
You got a guy
if his name were George Soros, you would immediately understand why I have a problem with him. But because he's Elon Musk and he's Trump's buddy and he hangs out at Mar-a-Lago, then suddenly we're supposed to think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
I mean, and he was a guy. Here's another one. All right. Sorry to burst everybody's bubble. I know it's still in the honeymoon phase here, right? But kind of curious how many people that are the big stars of the Trump administration, all former Democrats. Interesting, isn't it? Kind of like Reagan, just a little bit, right? So you got Trump, you got RFK Jr., you got Tulsi, and you got, who'd you just mention? There's Elon Musk, right? This is a guy, sustainable development, right? Electric cars, SpaceX satellites, a social media company, a brain computer interface company. Like all of that right there is enough for him to run a social
but it's got to be okay though. But it's got to be okay because he's letting Nazis have freedom of speech on X. So he must be really for freedom of speech. So we can trust him because he lets Nazis question the Holocaust on X. So, he really cares about our liberty.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, come on. It's hard to look at it and think that he's doing it for anything other than he's going to use the social media as a data outpost to track everybody's, right, get your psychological profiles in there. He's got his own satellite, so he can basically has his own infrastructure for running it. And then
guys, he's making babies in a lab. Like he's literally
By the way,
taking.
I keep hearing people say he's doing. Is that true?
That's as far as I know, credible reports say that only one of his children was conceived the usual way. The rest are IVF, and they used CRISPR.
You know who was? Oh, really? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to look at it. Well, I was gonna say,
I don't know if that's true.
have to look at the
That's
CRISPR
the
one.
rumor
Okay.
is that they actually were doing gene manipulation to get the smartest. Blah 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 blah.
I mean, yeah, he had the money where he could go off on one of those Peter Thiel seasteading island. Peter Thiel's a guy that wanted to make. He wanted to make basically they call it seasteading. You manufacture an island. Okay, and then it wouldn't follow any laws, so you could experiment with. This was the idea, so you could experiment with like genetic engineering and stem cells and stuff that you can't do in other countries. So who knows? Maybe you could go out there and.
Well, that's the rumor is the rumor. The credible sources say that they're mostly IVF kids, and then the rumor is that they were also genetically.
Well, look, I'll tell you this here. I think it was called the Repository for Germinal Choice. I believe that's what it was called. It was one of the first sperm banks, but it was specifically made for. It was like a genius sperm bank, and I forget who made it. Was it Shockley? It was one of these. It's a eugenics project. Okay, so the sperm bank IVF. With or without the whole idea of.
Well, there's no question. Elon Musk. I don't think he even really apologizes for it. He's a eugenist. Larry Ellison is a eugenist. So, I mean, how many eugenists do we really want involved in setting education policy for America?
Yeah, and maybe the better word in the 21st
maybe zero.
Century, I was saying maybe the better word is transhumanist, eugenics 2.0, right? I think
you're right. You're right. You're right. We should have chips. We should all be, like skin jobs. Anyway,
Peter Thiel's another one.
Yeah, well, we know, and Tony's pointing it out in the comments here. That the gene therapy, so to speak, we know that was a mass experiment. That's I don't think anyone doubts that at this point. You couldn't call even if they were like, no, it's not. We really believe we're helping. It by definition is an experiment because they didn't really know what was going to happen.
Well, look, if you can go back, anybody can go back, go on my website, which says go into the interview section, go in the year 2020 and 2021. You could probably swing a cat and click on one and catch an interview where I said that whole mandate project for the jabs was foot in the door for precision medicine. What did they announce at Stargate? Personalized. That's what precision. For people that don't know, precision medicine is the precision medicine initiative started under Obama. It's personalized medicine. That means medicine that's tailored for your particular genome. Okay, well, so what are they talking about? This cancer moonshot that they're going to personalize mRNA cancer vaccines. It's precision medicine, and Moderna and these companies couldn't get a product to market. But since we got some data on humans now that we had to emergency it in, so maybe it's a little safer to tinker with. And I mean, so I guess I was correct on that. Right. So
but God forbid we should stop eating crap. God forbid we should stop putting an acceptable amount of lead in Girl Scout cookies. It's like, anyway, I don't know. Have we forgotten anything? All I know is, Jake, that I'm gonna talk to Courtney Turner next week about debunking the school choice myths. Like their talking points. And you've certainly given me a lot of information, valuable information, and data to back that up. But what's if you think about their talking points that they have, which one, in your opinion, is the biggest lie? Which one, when you hear it, you just want to punch something?
I mean, one of my go-tos was we already hit it, was fun students, not buildings. That one. I mean, and just the whole euphemism choice. I don't know. The editors changed my last subtitle to pick your poison. It was choose your poison. It was supposed to be a play on choice and choose.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
So, whatever. But
my husband says choose your prison cell.
Well, that was to your point, I picked that because it's like, just like I always say, choose your choice. It's just kind of like this circular, like, what do we mean by choosing? What am I choosing? Like, what kind of options do I have? It's almost, it's like, you had a choice whether or not you're going to get your jab too. I mean,
sure,
like,
you could choose to lose your job and never not
mean?
go to school and not, whatever.
So those are the two as far as the sloganeering that they do. But the other one is, where they make it like, oh, don't you care about students that don't have, the options or the ability to get this better education? And it's like, yes, I do. And no, they won't be able to get anything better. So like, those are the three ones, right?
I've just been, they've stopped asking me. They just tell me like, so you want to trap children in failing schools? Yeah. Somebody calling himself an objectivist. Like, if you can believe that. Went after me the
libertarian now.
Well, he went after me the other day, quoting Ayn Rand, which is hilarious to me because I am an objectivist, but he was like, saying, well, Ayn Rand said that an educated population, I'm like, I don't usually speak for dead people, but I think I'm on pretty solid ground right now saying that there's zero chance she would support this, like less than zero. And this guy came at me and said, you are one of the most mean-spirited, vindictive people I've ever seen. And most school choice people who are opposed to school choice are mean-spirited and vindictive. And I'm like, what? I mean, that's what bothers me, I guess, is the straw man upon straw man saying that people like you, people and I are in the way of children getting a good education. And then I always say to them, okay, let's give you your argument that I'm in the way of children getting a good education. Define good education. Define it. Like, what is your definition of a good education? And if they will actually answer you, and it's a rare person who will, they usually just flip you off and whatever. But if they will, it usually comes out with something, they'll be prepared for the job market and a career in the 21st century, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you see, we have different definitions of what a good education is. So we're not even having the same conversation.
And in the meantime, that's exactly, both left and right, and public and school choice and community schoolers and every other euphemism that we've had shoved down our throats for however many decades. 21st century skills for the global emerging workforce has been a staple. I challenge you to find anything published by the Department of Education in the last, in my entire lifetime and even beyond, that doesn't use that language in some respect.
And how is it going? The same people who thought, the same people who thought in the 60s and 70s that they could predict what we would all need to know in just the 80s. Okay, never mind 90s, 2000s, whatever, have been wrong, and then wrong again, and wrong some more. And now we have kids. I just found today, I was today years old when I found out it is an actual phenomenon that a large percentage of Gen Z cannot tell time using an analog clock. They can't read an analog clock. And if you say something to them like it's 11:45 or it's quarter past something, they think you mean 25 minutes. Yeah. And some of them are in college. So yeah, I became aware of this today. And I thought to myself, okay, the same people who brought that about, the same government that has been in charge of all of this, and it's alternated between Republicans and Democrats. It's not just Democrats that have done this. These are the people you want to give more power to allegedly fix the thing they broke so badly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about we don't do that?
Right. Well, and you noted this, this objectivist that's basically telling you that objectivism or libertarianism, however you want to phrase it, is this is look at the network behind Project 2025. The Koch brothers, once upon a time, were pals with Murray Rothbard at Cato Institute. By the way, Cato is another one of these think tanks that's connected to one of the Project 2025 authors, and being Andrew Gillen. Okay. But Murray Rothbard broke with Koch and right, basically on the things we're talking about, right? They basically, you know, what they call the Beltway libertarians, they wanted to use the government to establish public-private partnerships, to legislate in ways that would be more friendly towards libertarianism. But you know, people like Rothbard, they would have never been for that type of stuff, right?
No.
You know, he broke.
And same with Rand. You know, I think it's the same reason that people call themselves Republicans, to get a certain voting block behind them, when in fact they're statists, they're collectivists. You know, they call them rhinos, what do you even call them? But they're at the core, they share all the important traits with, you know, the socialist, Marxist, whatever, you know, other than their personal values, perhaps their personal like social values. But in terms of economics, these are not free marketeers. Just because Peter Thiel wants to make as much money as he possibly can so he can buy the toys that he wants to buy. Same with Elon Musk, who wants to go to Mars. Same with, you know, what's his name? Ellison, who wants to live forever and probably cryo his brain or implant it in somebody else or whatever. Just because they think that businesses, corporations that they run should be able to make as much money as they want without any interference doesn't make them libertarians or objectivists or whatever. They just like money. And they don't care if they have to be rent-seeking leeches with the government to get it. They're not philosophically aligned with people who believe in free markets and individual liberty. No. That's evident.
I mentioned earlier the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, funded by Charles Koch Foundation, George Soros Open Society Foundation. Do you know who really was one of the main people that promoted some of the Austrian school, the libertarian economics? It's David Rockefeller. You know where else that he studied? London School of Economics, which is basically the hotbed for Fabian socialism. This is what I'm getting at. It's the same phenomenon. He's using elements of both economic systems to basically create this communitarian, techno-fascist, technocracy, whatever you want to call it. But it has all of the accoutrements of sort of the communist, socialist welfare state and the company town, right? Yep. And so, you know, and that's what we're seeing, you know.
Well, you know, we've gone over a lot of stuff tonight, and your article, which I hope everybody watching reads if you've not already read it, the link again is in the description. And you may think to yourself like, well, it's all so complicated. And you know what? They're very smart people, and maybe they just understand things better than I do. And I just don't understand it. And you might be tempted when people show you things or explain things, well, it's going to be really good. It's adaptive learning, that if you don't readily understand it, that maybe it's because you're too dumb to understand it and they're smarter than you are. And what I would like to suggest, no, not even suggest, I'll tell you, this is Deb's prescription. If somebody can't explain it to you, their reform, their plan, their policy is such that your own child could understand it, simply say no. Because these are your children. It is incumbent upon them to be able to make it so easy for you to understand, not just understand what it is, but why it's good, not for society, the country, the whatever, marketplace, blah, 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 but for your individual kid. In such simple terms, whatever. That's the first task that they have. And even if they manage that, and even if you were to agree, ask them this fundamental, can I say no? Can I say no? And if the answer is, well, but you know, it's, we know we need to have everyone participate or it isn't going to work, like they did with Obamacare. If everybody doesn't participate, it won't work. If they're focused on outcomes, general outcomes, broad outcomes, and they keep talking to you about outcomes, and they can't just say, sure, absolutely, you can say no. And when I say you can say no, that means you can opt out of paying for it. You can opt out of participating in it. You can opt out of having yourself hooked up to the system of it. You can literally live your life in a whole separate lane and nobody's going to bother you. And there's not going to be a void where it's like, well, where's your card? Where's your ID? Where's your blockchain number? Where's your this? Where's your that? Because if that's the case, then you can't say no. You might not be a active participant, but you're now living in, District 12, right? In the Hunger Games, you're so off the grid, you don't exist. So if you can't say no, and they won't explain it to you in the ways that you understand it, it's just assume the worst. there just shouldn't be anything in America you can't say no to that's where you're not committing a crime. You're not doing anything wrong. You just don't want to participate.
No.
And that's what this is. They're making it so you cannot say no. It's school choice for them, not for you.
Yeah. Well, I would say that's generally good information, recommendation in general, which is if you don't fully understand something, don't jump into it yet. Right. I mean, I don't care if it takes you another month, a week, a year, whatever it is, you know, I mean, you know, you have to be able to look before you leave. So, I mean, and that goes, the reason I'm saying this is because I just think of sort of clearly most of the people that had inflammatory comments did not read beyond the headline of the article, just based on the things they say. I mean, this is just
yeah, of course. And the people who come after us for opposing school choice very clearly don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
Right. They don't. They're believing talking points, and they desperately want to believe in the goodness of people who seem to agree with them about what the problem is. But you guys, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to diagnose the problem. You're able to diagnose the problem. The schools are not teaching our kids how to read, write, do math, have the skills they need to function as independent human adults away from us, away from their parents. They can't do it. Or maybe you even as a parent feel like there was stuff you didn't learn and now you're feeling the heat of it. Like, oh, God, I didn't even learn enough stuff. Okay. So you want to believe that the people who agree with you on that say, yes, isn't it terrible that they want all good things and any prescription they have for you, especially if they have lots of letters after the name PhD, blah, 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 that certainly they mean well. Certainly they don't judge a policy on its intentions. Don't judge a policy on its, desired outcomes. Does it make sense? And can you say no? That's it. That's it for me. Any final thoughts, words, suggestions, readings?
People always say my book is scary and everything that I talk about is scary. And I think people might have used the term black pill, which I think is like the new conspiracy theorist pejorative now, but
it is.
I don't, this is just kind of an anecdotal, maybe kind of a motivational anecdote. I mean, I personally, it doesn't scare me. Like I'm focused on the solution is in the problem. Like me understanding the problem, however dark or daunting or overwhelming it might be, it always makes me feel better because at least I'm oriented and I can see it coming right now. And now I at least can think about the solutions. People always, so I'll lay out the problems and then people want, what do we do? What's the solution? And I can understand why, if you haven't ever thought of any of this and I dump it all on you, that it's probably way scarier than me having sort of sifted through it. And at that point, it probably feels like, well, I to even understand the problem on the audience's end is probably daunting. So they want something that's like an easy solution, right? A voucher, something where, right, hope there's somebody is going to kind of come and save them in one way or another. But I just have to say that, that's not reality. Like, you got to be your own hero on this. You can do it. I don't have children, so it's hard for me to, I can't say that I totally understand what it entails to, do that, to homeschool a child and, work a job and do everything else. But I can say that, the time that the hours and hours and hours I put in to all my articles, all my research, hopefully so that you can help, right? So that you who have children can, right, do right by them.
Right.
I'm an adjunct for people that don't know what that is. It means I get paid per course per semester. I don't have benefits. I don't have an office. I have to bounce around at 3 different schools. What I'm saying is I don't have a lot of resources. I don't have a lot of time, right? But I working uphill. And if you don't think that I didn't seriously risk my job every time I ran my mouth about lockdowns and even the book itself, all of this, saying things that are entirely unpopular in academia, like all of these things, if I can do all of those things, right, you can do whatever it takes to get your child educated in a better way than the government or the big corporation.
Right.
And I mean, that's the best. A friend of mine once, when I started talking about all this stuff, he said something like, I could tell that it was the wheels were turning. He knew that he could tell it was legit. And then he says, "What are you going to do about it?" And I think what he was really thinking was like, part of what he was doing was because he knew that it was a problem that needed to be solved. But if he could get me to say that I didn't have a solution, well, then why should he think about it? Because even a person that thinks about it doesn't have, and at the time I didn't have an answer. Now today, but I could go back and I'd say, well, first I'm going to write some articles, and then I'm going to write a book, and then I'm going to go to Charlotte Iserbyt's house, and then she's going to give me her entire library and all of her files, and then I'm going to go speak in Poland, and then I'm going to get it translated in Japanese, and then I'm going to go speak in Moldova, and then, and at the time, I didn't think that I could even get a single article published. But, my point is, you take the first step, and you take the next step, and by the time you get towards the goal, you'll have accomplished way more than you ever thought was possible. That's all I could say.
Well, exactly. And I think, I love your point about how when you understand the problem and you understand all the pieces, I mean, it does give you, I personally feel more at ease because I know I won't be, bamboozled. Right? That if I have to make a choice for my kids, I'll feel that sense of commitment to it. I'm not going to be like wondering, is this the right choice? I'll know. And I want also to model for my children that same degree of independence, the degree of independence of thought that I want them to have. I don't want to be a follower because then my kids are going to see that. And they're going to go, oh, we go with what the GOP says, or we go with the Democrat because that's what mom does, or that's what dad does, or whatever. And is that the kind of kid I want? I mean, do I want them to grow into an adult who, sticks their finger in the wind and says, I don't know, let me turn on the TV and see what I'm supposed to think today. And so if I don't take this apart and see a whole crowd going this way and go, wait a minute, what? Then how are they going to learn to do it? How are they going to learn? They watch us, they listen. They see us questioning, they question. And so most of the important things your children are going to learn are going to be learned in the home anyway, regardless of what school or education system you put them in. So as you're evaluating even that, you have to do that due diligence, or they're going to wonder. And God forbid you plug them into some kind of Skinnerian system and they don't just, glaze over and become the little bot they're supposed to be, where they don't notice that they're miserable, right? They're little Stepford children. What if they know, like Neo, they're plugged into the matrix and they don't want to be? Okay. And yet now the dollar's following your kid. They're going, oh, we have someone over here who is not very happy. They're being compliant. What are we going to do about this? And how does your kid extricate him or herself from that? And are they going to hold you accountable? Are they going to turn one day to you and go, just like a lot of kids do today, why'd you send me to that school? Why did you put me in that environment? Why did you let me go there? Okay. Well, you think it's going to be better when they're, plugged into the matrix like this? I just couldn't do it to my own kid. I would feel like it's a form of brain mutilation without consent.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things you kind of get touching on here is too, and I think maybe I was trying to get sort of at that as well, is that, just making the effort to teach the children outside of the corporate government school, them seeing the efforts you make, right? I mean, just that instills, right, an orientation, at least a healthy skepticism of the institutions that are going to try and push them around in life. And even if you might not feel like your literacy is the strongest, or your numeracy, like that, you might feel like you aren't the most skilled to transmit these, the cliche is students learn to read till 4 and then they read to learn. You don't have to get that super good at reading at that level, right? I mean, it's just basically, if you got basic phonics down, you'd be surprised at how quickly they could become autodidacts if their curiosity remains and they're inspired by mom or dad who is taking the road less traveled, taking the difficult path, going uphill against the forces of corporations and government.
Right.
I mean, that in
And I
itself
think
is
really
less.
what it highlights though, Jake, is that, when you bring up all the stuff of how easy it is, how inexpensive it is to do all this, what it highlights is two things. Parents who don't think they have the patience, like that this somehow requires a ton of patience, and those who need childcare. In other words, like they can't be there. They've got a child under the age of 12 and they cannot physically leave them someplace. And the government has got people believing that it's that or one of the buildings that they say it's okay to go to. So in other words, we stopped being neighborly. We stopped looking at building our own community. If you look to the government, the community school, whatever, if you see school as a community, John Taylor Gatto talked about this, when it isn't a community because you didn't pick it. You might have picked where you lived, but you didn't pick all those people in your zip code. You didn't pick that building to go to and be organized in. And you certainly didn't decide that your child should only spend their day with people of the same age. And so that's not a community. It's a network and it's set up by other people. But what's happened is just as our children now with their devices are like not sure how to make a friend, like, I don't know, I can't make eye contact. All my friends are in Snapchat. There are plenty of parents who don't seem able to just go knock on a door of their neighbor and just be like, hey, you got kids like I got kids. Hey, let's put our heads together, figure this shit out. I mean, it has to be blunt, but if you bring this up amongst people, they're like, what? You mean actually speak to people and ask for help? Yes, that's what I mean. Like, you need help. You need someone to watch your kids during the day. Maybe they do too. Maybe they work opposite hours of you, but we're not being creative anymore about our problem solving. And we keep looking to government to do it. But I need childcare. I'm like, okay, that's a you problem. And I don't mean to be rude. I face the same problem. It's a problem we face every summer. How do you solve it in the summer? Well, let me guess. The government does it then too. I mean, I don't know. To me, it just comes down to if you let the government run your parenting, then they're running your child's childhood. And why would it then be that they're not running your child's adulthood? When does that stop? Like at what point? Because now they're running your adulthood. Your parenting is your adulthood. So like at what point are you now separate from Big Daddy?
Yeah, that's why I think, to your point about sort of inspiring a particular type of disposition just through whatever homeschooling or unschooling efforts you have, that can go a long way into adulthood. Because if that's not instilled, to your point, if you're conditioned one way, we used to say this in we were training when I used to compete, the way you train in the gym is the way you're going to fight in the ring. Like if you keep quitting every time you feel a little bit gas and you sit out every other round, every time you're feeling tired, or every time someone hits you, you fold and you don't hit back. And that's what if you are doing that in here with people that are your friends that aren't going to hit you 3 more times and knock you unconscious and be mean to you, like, what do you think's going to happen when your adrenaline's pumping and you're in front of a crowd of people and this person has bad intentions? Like, you're going to, in general, the way, the habits you cultivate when push comes to shove, if we ever, we're in another lockdown situation, when a crisis happens, when you need to make a quick decision, right? If you don't cultivate that type of mentality or that healthy skepticism, that I'm going to go my own path attitude, you will capitulate. So I mean, that alone. Yeah,
I would argue the entire system as is, from going back to Horace Mann and Dewey and the progressives who established this current system, was a means of conditioning Americans and all the immigrants coming in and the freed slaves and so on, conditioning them to be good little worker bees for that industrial revolution. That was literally at the height of the Industrial Revolution, and all of these, mucky mucks got together, Rockefeller included. And, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want my good little worker bees, and I don't want them aspiring to too much. So let's set up this compulsory system and I'll fund it and all this kind of stuff. And so the system we have now, the thing that everyone's complaining about, the thing that the people are saying, oh, woe is us, we're, our middle class is shrinking and we're under the thumb and we can't get ahead and the American dream is dying. And like, well, who do you think the architects of that were? I mean, where do you think this came from? Teaching, education, the whole thing is a people business, or at least has been until now. If you turn it over to machines, I don't think it's going to get better. But people created this, did this, and then every subsequent generation was further conditioned for obedience, conditioned even more for compliance, conditioned even more to the point where now, what you're seeing now is however many, 3 or 4 generations of compliance in action. That's what you've got. The teachers you don't like with the blue hair who are whining about everything. I'm a victim and my anxiety. Okay. The researchers who talk down to you like you're a moron. Where do you think that came from? So now what do you think it's going to be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years if you keep the entire population of children in that system?
Well, that was
Jello, human Jello. Like, I don't know.
Oh, I was going to say that in the Jonathan Butcher piece where he's looking at fintech for ESAs. I mean, by the way, if you think that Republicans and people that are business oriented always do things more efficiently and more effectively, I've been ripped off many times. Right? I've purchased many a subpar product that I can, that you can swing a cat and find a company that what they care about is profit more than the customer satisfaction or the product. If you're satisfied enough where they can't get sued and you'll come back, that's good enough for them. I worked for this guy. We used to do construction, and he used to we were trying to put this piece in, and he's trying to eyeball it. He's cutting the piece 4 times. I'm like, dude, just put the measuring tape up there. And after the 4th piece, he goes, I say nail it. They just left it. I mean, to me, that's the mentality of these types of people. And I'm mentioning that because in the Max Eden article that he wrote on school choice and impact investing, and in the Jonathan Butcher article that he wrote on fintech for ESAs, terrible writing. I'm sorry. I'm not trying, typos, grammar errors, and then just it's not precise. Like the one of them was saying, you're talking about the percentage of residents who hold. He should have been saying residences because the next metric was quantifying numerous people within a household. Like, I'm just saying, like, what I gather from that is that guess who that's written for? It's written for investors. It's written for, right. And guess what they care about? They don't care about the particulars. They care about, hey, give me the elevator pitch. How do I get this to market as quickly as possible? How do I cut my losses and get my profits as quickly as possible? Okay. But in that article, the reason why I bring this up is because a bunch of it's just like statistics about demographics in terms of generations and how many people use fintech. And they're like, oh, now the millennials and basically saying that, every generation, as more people grow up with more and more immersed in this ecosystem of all things digital, right, the more inclined they are to use it, right? So this is to your point that, it's not just being comfortable with the devices, but it's also, being comfortable with like interacting with GPT AI instead of human being. Yep. Right. And so,
or more to the point, being uncomfortable interacting with human beings because you only know how to talk to machines. You just mentioned that Max Eden thing. So I'm just going to show it one more time. This invest in outcomes, human capital performance bond. As a parent of a human being, I can't think of anything more creepy than total strangers far away deciding they're investing in my child's performance. Okay. And referring to it that way and talking about them as part of a performance pool and a working capital pool. And that there's investors who are literally going to decide whether there's an appropriate ROI on my investment. But like, that's your child. The only person invested in your child is your child themselves and you. The idea that the government is going to open the door to randos far away with interests that have nothing to do with you and your love for your kid, investing in your kid. How anyone conceived of this? This is like demented to me.
Yeah, that piece is so that I mean, it's all related, but his piece is on impact investment. I just that graphic came from Alison McDowell's Wrenching the Gears blog. But it was a nice model to show how a human capital performance bond, which isn't the same, but isn't really that much different from an social impact investment bond or a pay for success contract, right? They might
Does
be.
it really matter,
No,
Jake?
I just wanted I just want everybody to know that I didn't pull that from the
I know.
Max
You just want to
Eden
make sure
page.
that we know
Yeah,
that's not Max Eden's
yeah,
diagram. I
yeah.
got it. That's not Max Eden's
But it is
diagram.
illustrative of the stuff he's talking about. Yes.
Yeah. The point simply is we start thinking of our children as like investment, I mean, of other people, that they're going to buy some kind of financial vehicle that is represented by human beings, developing, growing, brand new people on planet Earth. I just can't wrap my head around that. I'm sorry.
And they refer to them as that for a very long time. You know, there's a piece I wrote on Unlimited Hangout a few years ago. It's NEA World Order, kind of a play on New World Order. But I looked at a piece that they had in there, which was, I always get the title mixed up, something like programmed instruction and programmed learning, or machine instruction and program, something like that. It's a showcase of B.F. Skinner's theories and devices and other people like Sidney Pressey, and et cetera, et cetera. But it was developed by the NEA's Department of Audiovisual Instruction in partnership with the Human Resources Research Organization, HUMRO. It's a division of the Army. And to this day, if you look at the website, they'll tell you one of the things that they specialize in is human capital management. So, you know, I mean, this is going back to that piece that I'm referring to, that the NEA Davy piece was early 1960s, maybe mid 1960s, you know. So, I mean, and again, you know, it's in partnership with the Department of the Army, which again, you know, a lot of this stuff comes out of Rand Corporation. So, you know, all of this, you know, the scenario planning, the systems dynamics, the PPBS, all these different centralized planning methodologies that they use at the Department of Education, all that stuff goes way back, and it's all geared towards basically turning the student into a human resource or a human capital unit that basically is just gonna, you know, make the gears in the social credit economy turn smoothly. That's it.
I will never, as long as I live, be able to understand the mindset of the type of people, the control freaks who want to do any of this, who look at this and go, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll plan life for millions of people. We can make the world perfect. This is just another kind of utopian fantasy.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think they just looked at
Plato's
Plato's
so disturbing.
Republic, and they were like, hey, we got some technology. Maybe let's give this Plato's Republic thing a try. I think maybe maybe we can make it happen. Yeah. Well, some of them, I mean, you know, obviously there's a utopian bent. Some of them are transhumanists. You know, there's as James Lindsay, you probably talked about, you know, the Gnostic, sort of this occult kind of Luciferian New Age, conscious evolution, all these different you know, psychobabble terms that they use for their sort of their spiritual version of their technocracy. But I think some of them might just be, you know, engineering brains are interesting because it's like, once you figure out, like, oh, if we did this, we could do that. Some people with engineering brain, I think I gotta see it. I gotta put it together. I think Hugo de Garis is one of these AI engineers that's like, he kind of is like, yeah, probably odds are not too, probably gonna turn out bad, but we gotta see. I gotta just find out. I gotta check it out. Let's just try it and see what happens.
I just think there are people in this world who are comfortable with reality. In other words, mess, ambiguity, chaos, you know, like randomness. I mean, things that are just outside of your immediate control. I think there are people who are okay with that. At least, you know, not that we love it and think everything's awesome, but we're like, accept it. We just accept that it wins, like that we don't have control over all the pieces of this gargantuan puzzle. And the best we can do is run our own little lives and leave other people to do the same and hope we don't, you know, step on each other's toes. And then there are the people who are so deeply uncomfortable with reality that they desperately need to, reject it in a way that doesn't allow you to be comfortable with it either. Like whether it's the people going, no, there's more than two genders. God damn it. It's like because I said so. I want there to be, and it won't make it so, but they want to force everybody else to accept that little fantasy. And then you have the people who say, no, individuals shouldn't be in charge of their own children and their own lives and their own choices because they'll choose badly. And I got here to this lofty position at Heritage or President of the United States or whatever the heck it is because I deserve it, because I'm a better human. Not because luck, money, other people's incentives, or whatever, because I am just fundamentally better than everybody else. And so I should be able to tell everybody else how to live. And I really think that's what's going on.
No. Well, it's interesting, too, like, this idea to sort of like bubble wrap the world, make everything flow perfectly, streamline everything so there's no error, everything is predictable, right? We're going to be basically no suffering, right? So basically with no suffering, no room for improvement, no room for growth, right? No proximal zone of development, all this type of stuff. I think of, I used to record. I haven't touched instruments in a long time because thankfully I still keep up with my martial arts, but everything else goes to work.
You'll be able to defend yourself against these people.
But as far as music goes, I still have an MPC. I haven't used it in a while. It's, they call the old beatbox. Okay. It's one of the old instruments that probably nobody uses for recording electronic music. Now there's a timing correct on it. So if you're going to do the drum kits on it, it'll hit. If you want it on quarter notes or eighth notes, right, it'll perfectly, right? It'll divide up that whatever time signature and it'll hit those quarter notes perfectly. And I like electronic music, but it has a very square, angular, kind of a stiff, rigid, like a live band, an orchestra, or just a live performance. Everything is never perfectly on the quarter beat or the half beat or the eighth note, right? It's always, and sometimes you're like Jimi Hendrix, when he'd mess up a note, he'd bend it and come up with all the crazy, I was like that's the human element. And when I think of the AI that they want to make ubiquitous, especially for like something like Grammarly or for using a large language model to help you with language processing. Like if you're overly reliant, personally, I won't use it at all, but if you're letting this thing not just fix your grammar, but like tell you if your sentences lack clarity or if the supporting details connect to a topic sentence, or if your summary statement warrants the topic sentence, or if your paragraphs are cohesive with the theme, all these things, right? If it's doing all these things for you, first of all, you're going to lose the metacognitive self-reflection that actually is the mind muscle that enables you to communicate language more efficiently. But if you start taking all of its prompts, especially grammatically, like it'll always tell you to remove the expletive that, right? So there's the demonstrative that and the expletive that. The demonstrative that is, right, it's like demonstrate, I call them, to the students, I call them pointing words, because it's usually used with a referent, like this dog, that cat, right? But sometimes I might say that, I say like, I know that I like cake, right? The that in that is not demonstrative. It's not pointing at the next clause. It's just a place for the, I could say, I know I like cake, and it's still grammatically correct. So Grammarly, the AI will, because it's more efficient, it'll always tell you to get rid of the expletive that, which means that if you always did that, like think about having those types of cuts go all the way through everything you write, right? It's sort of the equivalent of that beatbox electronic music where, it's still a song and it's on time, but like everything is very mechanical. Like, it almost would like mimic, I think, just sort of the geometric differences in a carbon-based molecule versus a silicon-based molecule, almost, so
well, it also can't differentiate between fiction and nonfiction. And so imagine you're trying to write a little, a story or even a summary of a story, summary from a narrative. Okay. And you're using adverbs and adjectives, because why wouldn't you? Because that's what makes descriptive stories creative and so forth and so on, and have a unique style. And it'll go in there and tell you too many adjectives, too many adverbs. It'll remove them again for efficiency or clarity or whatever. And then you have this dry as toast, boring thing that you're, and it's like, what? There's a time and a place for those too. We don't have adverbs and adjectives for no reason, and the student will never learn when should I use them? When shouldn't I use them? When is it really totally up to me and it's, my choice? You don't let a machine decide for you what good writing is. You just don't do that. And it doesn't explain to them what rules they might have broken, because it's very arbitrarily applying rules. So, I tutor writing a lot, and I get very frustrated when I tell students, if you're working with me, you need to deactivate Grammarly on your and spell check and grammar check and all the things on your word processor. And I would personally prefer it if you wrote your first drafts in pen, double spaced, so that you can take a picture. I don't care, we'll work on it. But if you do that, there's so many benefits to doing it. You can type your final, but if you're going to type and it's going to keep interrupting you and going, this is red and this is wrong or whatever, I'm like, it's going to get in the way of your thinking.
Yes. And as language arts, where you grow in your, not just your ability to process language, but your ability to communicate it, is monitoring the narrative you have in the head, the monologue, making sure there's no contradictions, making sure the categories of the mind comport with the categories of reality, and then putting it on paper or saying out loud. Usually putting out paper is better because now you can see it visually, then asking yourself questions about whether or not the words on the page say the thing that was in your head, and whether or not that actually is accurate relating to the data that you're working with, right? Like, that's all a process of metacognition. That's all a recursive process of thinking about thinking, putting the thoughts down on paper, thinking about the thoughts on the paper, and then refine. That's the more you're using AI, Grammarly, or any other large language model to, quote, help you with that, all you're doing is you're using a crutch. It's like, if you ever had a bad injury, most people will tell you, maybe for a brief period when it's really hurt, maybe a crutch or a brace, but as soon as you can get rid of it, you get rid of it, because otherwise everything atrophies.
That's right.
Same thing.
Yeah, no, I broke my leg twice. I know all about it. But and it's very difficult when the schools and the teachers are using the AI, and you have so-called educators talking about how it's the next greatest amazing thing. It's a problem. The last thing I wanted to mention, because it's kind of on this topic, is I was just watching, if any of you watched the what's his name? Sheridan, the guy who did Yellowstone and all that. Anyway, the latest one is called 1923. And I think it's Taylor Sheridan or Taylor something. Anyway, there's a scene in the most recent episode where there are two Native Americans. This is in 1923. And they're sitting and they're talking. And one is young, one's a teenage girl, and one's a father figure, father age. And he's making something, he's carving something. And she says, oh, you're doing that by hand. You're coming. She says, how come nobody does that anymore? He said, used to be, everybody did it. Everybody made the things by hand. Everybody carved everything by hand. We knew all this. And she said, well, how come nobody knows how to do it anymore? And he said, well, he says, the white man, what he says. And she says, what do you mean? And I'm glad they did that and just go with the white man. He says, well, when they first came, we traded. We made the things and we traded for other things that they had. And, we traded. And then at a certain point, they just gave us the things. They stopped trading and they just gave us the things that we needed. And people no longer made things to trade. And we forgot how to make the things. And she said, well, why would they do that? He said, well, when somebody gives you the things, and I'm, getting as well as I can remember, when they give you the things that you need, you ask fewer questions. He says, people who get the things and they know they have to get have them given, as opposed to make them themselves. Well, we don't know how to make for ourselves. We don't know how to do the things for ourselves. And we have to go and ask. Then we ask fewer questions and we cause less trouble. Was kind of the gist of what he was saying. And as I'm sitting there watching this, I'm like, and here it's our turn now. right? So what it comes down to for me is, people want to make it about race or whatever. It isn't. It's about the state versus the individual. People with power, people who don't have the power. And by that, I don't mean necessarily they have money. There are plenty of people who have money who don't treat people like that. It's the people who have power plus gun. Meaning like, and the legal right to kill you, use it, imprison you, etc., with impunity. And that's the state. And right now they want to come and they want to hand you the education, hand you the money, hand you all the things after stealing it from you first, of course. And then we wonder why kids don't know how to do anything.
Yeah. That's an interesting analogy, because I've often thought of, if they reach their finish line, and we're alive to see the crossing of the finish line, meaning like, if it happens in our lifetime, I think the thing that it would be most comparable to would be what happened to the Native Americans. And
right.
Funny enough, it would have been right around, not funny, but that our first industrial revolution.
That's correct.
Right? It's basically the railroads came through, and with that just changed the entire way of life. And you sort of described one of the phenomena of that process. And that's kind of what I think what would look like. It'd be a slow process. And just like you said, one day it'll just be like a couple
generations. We're all living on the reservation. Going to the reservation school. I mean, like, and I mean, we're already, half of us have diabetes. So, I mean, that happened to them first. Now it's happened to us. I don't mean to make light of it. It's really quite insidious and disturbing, but I think it's just a function of statism. It's not a political ideology one way or the other. It's statism. If you look to somebody else to give you things, this is what happens. Yeah. And so to all those out there who are looking at school choice and saying, but I want it, I want my government cheese and I need it, and it doesn't, think about the possible negative unintended side effects of having this given to you, as opposed to striking out on your own and figuring out how to solve your problem, whatever your problem is about your child's education, on your own, with your family, with your neighbors, with your own chosen community, not the one the government assigned you to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's all I got. Yeah. Any final last words before we sign off?
No, I think we covered it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I am so grateful. Thank you so much for coming on and spending all this time talking to me and letting me rant and rave in your face.
It's always really talking with you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
No, I got to tell the audience, because when you reached out, just so you guys know, Jake writes to me, was like, "Hey, Deb, long time no speak. I wrote this article, and maybe we could talk about it on your show." And I was like, "Yes." Practically pounced on him, because I was like, I so desperately need to talk to somebody who like gets it, because I feel all alone on the island again. So I'm really actually grateful.
Oh, great. Well, no, good. I'm glad I could bring a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of light at the, I don't know if it's at the end.
To me, it is sunshine. Other people are like going to go home depressed, but I'm like, no, it's, when one person gets it and you feel less alone, you feel like, I know we're not alone either. Jake, we're not alone. There are other people who get it. And hopefully this program will get out to more people. And it's not that we'll be able to stop it, because I don't think we will. But I think the more people resist it and don't want it and are good sand in the gears for it, the less likely it will succeed in reaching that, as you point, finish line, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So at a minimum, there will always be a remnant of people. There always will be a remnant of people who live their own lives, chart their own course, whatever. They cannot literally control us all. We're not to that point. So the more we spread this information, I think the better off we'll be. But in the meantime, where can people find you? So I know they can find you on Unlimited Hangout, right? .com and anything else. Also on X, you're a Taoist professor. What else?
Schoolworldorder.info is the website that has a link to the book, which is at tryingday.com. You can also get it at Amazon. The book is School World Order. I have a database on the website, links to the social media on there as well. All my articles and presentations, interviews, conferences, etc. All that stuff is posted up there. But if you want to keep, if you want the stuff that's most up to date, because I usually it takes me a while to update the website. I kind of get back to it every couple months or something. So X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is where you find the most recent stuff. And then my most recent articles, you could always find those at Unlimited Hangout.
Right. Awesome. Thanks. And once again, not to like, toot my own horn or, whatever, but I hope you guys will also check out my, new endeavor, which is Cogito Learning Center. You can have a 30-minute free consultation, but if you like what I was saying about learning to write, that's one of the things that we specialize in, and we're doing novel studies, logic, and other stuff like that. So hopefully parents who feel like they can't leave the school, but they want their kids to get a more traditional, thinking brain education, I can offer that an hour at a time here and there. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Please like and share this broadcast. And I guess we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.